Hi everyone, this is Robert and welcome to IDG Live. This is a live stream about the Children of the Forest. If you tune in every week to this, then I apologise again for last week. I unfortunately was a little bit unwell, but I am completely better now. Thank you for all the well wishes. What I thought we would do was just go back and do what we were going to do last week, which is talk about the Children of the Forest. If you're interested in the Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, then I do every week. I was hoping to do it quite soon after the episode, but as it turns out, life has got in the way. So it's been a little bit later in the week. After every episode, though, I do a bit of my reaction, feedback, thoughts, comments from my patrons on this channel, IDG Live. So please do check that out. But I think today what we'll do on Children of the Forest is just dive straight into the comments, dive straight into the questions. As always, I am shaping this around questions I've got from my patrons. I will try and pick up as much as I can from the chat as we are going through. But let us start with a question from Taylor Jones. Is there ever an instance of the children and dragons interacting? I'm drawing a blank. The closest I can think of these two species getting together would be the current time, both being on the same side against the White Walkers without ever actually encountering one another. Yeah, so clearly on the TV show, then yes, there was a lot of we're on the same side, but they never really connected. Going back in history, then you're right, there isn't a recorded instance of the two of them working together. However, George R. Martin has told us two things. The Children of the Forest, basically one of the two oldest natural inhabitants of Westeros, the other being the giants. And also that there was a time when dragons roamed the entire world. And he clarified that that included Westeros. So we don't have any details. This was before things were recorded, before people wrote stuff down. So maybe we will never find out. But yes, probably way back in the past, dragons and children of the forest coexisted. I don't think they were ever close, but they probably did exist in the same hemisphere at the same time. Question from Purple Feline. With Howland Reed being allowed on the Isle of Faces, does he have a personal connection to the Children of the Forest? Were they perhaps interbred with the first men, creating the Crannog men at some point long ago? So I've got a few questions like this from my patrons. Is there a connection between the children and the Crannog men? Well, when you read what we're told about the Crannog men, the Crannog men, actually the Children of the Forest, where did they live? Now, in our minds, hollow hills, deep forests. Yes, that's true. But we're also told specifically in the Crannogs. So probably they lived in the neck. Perhaps they still live in the neck. Certainly, when you read those chapters with Jojen and Mira, when they get up to Bloodraven's cave, they don't um, they don't react with shock. It has to be said when whoa, there's a child of the forest, which makes you wonder whether either they've seen them before, or if they haven't seen them before, then this isn't just some distant legend to them. This is something that they're told exists in their world, is around them somewhere. So we have that coexistence. I think I'm pretty certain that. Then we add to that the fact that the Crannog men, they're all short. They're very much in tune with nature. The kind of magic that the Crannog men have feels, and also the kind of technology, that's the right way of saying it, feels very like the Children of the Forest. They're not there, they're not sort of arming themselves with this metal armor. They've not got great sort of steel swords or anything like that. What they do is they hide in the Cranoks in the marshland, and then they come out and attack from their safe positions, bows and arrows, uh, that sort of tridents for spears for catching frogs and the like. This is all very natural stuff, so the feel is very close to the Children of the Forest. We're never told exactly, but if I had to guess, I think the answer is yes. Very probably somewhere in the past. The the Cranach men are not, and when we say the Cranach men, we've only ever met in the books two Cranach men, Jadrian and Mira. We've only ever heard the names even of two more. So we're not looking at a representative sample here, but they are short, they're small, they're not particularly physically imposing. They work with nature. They haven't used metals and things like that. They haven't, as far as we can tell, built huge kind of stone structures. This feels very Children of the Forest. I think, yes, probably somewhere in the past there was some kind of intermarriage or something along those lines, but far enough in the past that whatever traces there were of Children of the Forest have now gone, and they just now look like short humans. For my peoples, thank you very much. Saying, referring to the previous question, this was about the dragons. Is it possible that natural dragons died out during the long night and were recreated later in Valyria? Yeah, it's possible. So George R. R. Martin sometimes gives us these little tidbits, little bits of information about the background, the history, the lore of his world, and he does think through these issues. By which I mean, when he goes on these rants about toxic butterflies and the like, that's because he's figured out how is my world structured and what are the implications of that. So when he tells us that, yes, at one point dragons were flying and roaming over Westeros, that means there has to be a reason why they're not there now. Now, I suppose the default answer is that the Valyrians found some way to tie the dragons down. Dragons do not roam. This is one of the things that George R. R. Martin is very keen on telling us. They do not roam. They stay where they are, and they hunt and feed and eat and live in a certain radius of where they are. So if the Valyrians somehow managed to capture all the dragons and bring them back to Valyria, then that would kind of work. That would be an explanation for why there are no dragons in Westeros. But perhaps, yes, in the long night, the dragons of Westeros were all destroyed. Ice defeated fire there, and they just never went back. That is certainly another option. In terms of is it possible that natural dragons died out and they were recreated later in Valyria? I think, given that dragons almost certainly were in Essos as well, Essos does have legends and histories of what happened in the Long Night, but they tend to be more to the east, to the northeast, as if what happened where they were stopped was that there's the Bone Mountains, which sort of bisect the continent of Essos to the west, pardon me, of Yeti to the east of the Dothraki Sea. That seems to have kind of stopped them there as far as these kind of legends and rumors go. So I think probably most likely, no, the first Long Night did not destroy all the dragons. Some of them survived, and then the Valyrians learned how to capture them. Let's go to A.D. Ross. Greetings, Sir Robert. Hope you and Dan are well. We are, thank you. In the world of Ice and Fire, there are hints of possible populations of children of the forest in Essos, at least historically. Do you think any survive? Also, do you think they were very distinct from the main populations in Westeros? So, yeah, when you read The World of Ice and Fire, which, if you haven't, just as a bit of background, this is the closest we have to a world book for A Song of Ice and Fire. It gives a quite detailed history of the Targaryen reign in Westeros, and also sort of a descriptor and very brief history of the rest of the world, Essos and beyond. And in that, we get, I'm going to say, 3, maybe 4 references to what are known as the Woodswalkers. Now, these Woodswalkers sound very similar to the Children of the Forest. They're short, they are dark-skinned, they seem quite peaceable as far as we can tell. They leave gifts for people. Their technology isn't particularly developed. They come across, if just from the bits that we read, and what we read is literally just a few sentences, as very similar to the Children of the Forest. They live in the forest, Woodswalkers. Now, are they still there? Perhaps. We're not really told. We're told in the Forest of Cohor, which is in the western part of Essos, certainly the biggest forest. A lot of that isn't explored by humans. Therefore, it's entirely possible that there may well be still some Woodswalkers. But the fact is that they aren't mentioned in the text as some people who are still there. Nobody really has met one. So they're occupying the same kind of mythical status as the children do in Westeros. Everyone's pretty sure they used to exist. They seem to know roughly what they were like. No one's seen one for a very long time. So, are they the same? And if so, what's gone on? So my working theory, which is going slightly beyond the children itself, but I think it's important to understand what the situation in Essos might be, is that one of the big legends of the Children of the Forest is that when the first men started invading over into Westeros, they came through this land bridge. There was a land bridge between what we now know as the Disputed Lands and what we now know as Dawn. And the Children of the Forest cast this very powerful spell, we're told, called the Hammer of the Waters, which severed that land bridge. It turned it just into the stepstone, so lots of little islands. Now, this is all legend. Whether it happened like that, we do not know. But if we go with the idea that that is what happened, and we go with the idea that the Weirwood network is somehow all connected underground, this is why, for example, you can't grow a weirwood at the top of the Erie because the roots can't go up through that much stone. This is why places the other side of massive mountain ranges, weirwoods don't seem to grow, because the weirwood network is more underground than overground. What would happen if you destroy this land bridge between Westeros and Essos? You would sever that link, which means that over in Essos, if you assume in Westeros is the kind of the heart of the network, in Essos you have it's kind of homeless weirwoods and children of the forest, because they're no longer attached to the main weirwood network. Now, where this theory goes most often, and I'll do a quick hat tip to Amanda, Disputed Lands, who's done some fantastic videos on this, is that this is where the shade of the evening trees come from. They are presented every single time. They're presented as a kind of like a polar opposite of the weirwoods. They're black and blue, not red and white. The shade of the evening drink that Danny and Euron and others drink, the way it's described, the way it tastes is exactly the same as the weirwood paste, but the outputs are slightly different. So the idea is that that part of the weirwood network got cut off. And with that, any children of the forest who happen to be living over in Essos, they're also cut off. So that's where we get this woods walker idea from, is that they're still there, but they don't have weirwoods anymore. So they're almost like this kind of like ghostly second cousins to the children of the forest. Right, let's go to Cannibal the Dragon, who's been a member here for 3 months. Thank you. Just to say, as this always reminds me, patrons, thank you. I hugely appreciate your support. I cannot do what I do without your support. If you wish to support this channel, the best way to do that is through Patreon. There's a link probably down in the description. If you don't want to go to Patreon for whatever reason and you'd rather stay on YouTube, then you can become a channel member here. That means that you get highlighted questions and things like that. So thank you very much, Cannibal the Dragon. Do you think that Westeros, Essos, and Sothorios were one, like we were back in the past? How are you today, and Dan? Well, how am I today? Very good. Thank you very much. How is Dan? Dan is good. It's been a little bit chilly here today, so he didn't want to go out for a second walk. Normally we do 2 walks a day, but he just refused. But you know, don't blame him. I didn't particularly want to go out either. As for the Westeros, Essos, and Sothorios, well, I mean, I sort of picked up already on this idea that Westeros and Essos were linked. As for Sothorios, well, we don't know huge amounts about it. George R. R. Martin doesn't give us the massive prehistory that you get from something like the Silmarillion. I think I'm going to say yes. We have literally zero information about this. George R. R. Martin wants us to understand this is a proper world. This isn't just some. We're not talking like a Terry Pratchett disc on top of elephants on top of a turtle, that kind of thing. This is it's a globe. It's out there in space. He's not talking sci-fi. This is just a planet, and that probably means that this planet has been around for millions of years. We only know the history we understand is just thousands of years. So probably in that time the lands shifted. So probably, but it's not a thing that George R. R. Martin has talked about huge amounts. And Commander Ray saying, if the children didn't create the others, what connection might they have, and how might that change their relationship with the first men? Okay, so this is building on the idea of building on, separating itself from the idea that the others came from the children of the forest. And I do have a question from one of our patrons later about this. Forgive me. We will come back to this, but I will answer this top level bit first. Why do we think, if we leave aside whatever happened on the TV show, why do we think it's likely that the others were created by the children of the forest? And when I say likely, we're not 100% certain on this, but the children were losing the battle with the first men. That much is pretty clear. And why wouldn't they? The first men, there were more of them. They multiplied quicker. They were stronger. They used metal, which was much better in combat than this kind of really brittle dragon glass thing that the children used. And men could chop down and burn down trees. They were just pushing their way across the continent. And yet, the pact happened, which was a peace treaty that guaranteed the children had some parts of this world. But also, crucially, the first men adopted the religion of the children. Now, this is an odd set of circumstances because you could possibly imagine the idea that the first men, maybe the leadership of the first men just decided, oh, we don't want war, let's have a peace treaty. Okay, that's fine. But for them to also accept the gods, the religion of the children, implies that they must have somehow seen its power, seen the rightness of it in some way. So that is leaving this question as what was it that the children did that made the first men just en masse change their entire belief system? Hold that thought, because the second thought of this one is that the children of the forest, we know, can produce huge magic that does amazing things. If they wanted to create somebody, which would make sense because they're not great fighters themselves, if they were wanting to create some kind of weapon that would work against humans, what would it look like? Well, it would be stronger than humans. It would multiply faster than humans because that was one of the big things, that humans just kept on growing. There were more and more of them. You wanted something that could outpace that, perhaps use the humans' numbers against them. You would expect it to in some way use something akin to the magic that the children of the forest knew, skin changing. And also, if they knew that they were creating an incredibly powerful weapon, they would want to have the reset button. They would want something that says, okay, we will make sure that you're great against humans, but we know how to defeat you. The we know how to defeat you is dragonglass. As we have seen, dragonglass, dragon steel, that is what works against the others and um, the whites. So it all kind of adds up. It kind of makes sense that the children of the forest did this huge magic. And also, don't forget, we are looking for some kind of preternatural magical event that happened that put the seasons out of balance. We're looking for some huge magical event in the past of this world that will need to be righted in some way. If there was this, and at some point the first men understood and realized the power of the children of the forest, then this all kind of adds up. We don't have the clue that says, yes, this definitely happened, but it kind of makes sense. So that's where we're sort of at with all of this. Now, Commander Ray, having spent 5 minutes explaining all of that, you're now going, if the children didn't create the others, which is the other option, obviously, what connection might they have? And might that change their relationship with the first men? So the others appeared for some reason, is my take on this. Now, the most logical reason is that they were created by the children of the forest. And we know they had some sort of magical technology, a bit like that. Cold Hands seems to have been preserved. He was killed and yet reanimated, kept alive, something along those lines. They did have this kind of magical technology. So it kind of makes sense that they did. But perhaps the great magical event, the preternatural event that just put everything in the world out of balance, seasons out of balance, it it could be that they opened a portal to another world. It's a little bit more sci-fi than we're expecting from this, but maybe. And the others came through that. Perhaps that was what happened. Um, the third option is that they weren't created by the children. They weren't summoned, brought by the children. They were just always there. And we didn't know about it. They lived up in the far, far north. And if that is the case, then there is no specific link between them and the children of the forest. We're just looking at some enemies of both. So if you're looking or about asking about what the relationship between the others, the first men, and the children is, if they're created, then from the other's perspective, the children are their creators and humans were what they were created to destroy. If they were summoned, then the children are their summoners, who they may or may not respect or like, but humans again, who they were there brought to destroy in some way. If they just happen to always been there, then there's no particular strength in the relationship between the others and the children. If the others wish to invade and to take over the rest of Westeros, Essos, wherever, it's just because that's what they want to do. So it's an interesting question because we come back to this idea of motivations, something that the show never really covered. What do the others actually want? I don't think that George R. R. Martin is so basic a writer that the others are just there wanting to kill all humans. That's not it. There is a reason for them attacking. There is a reason for them attacking again now. So, if that's the case, I think we will be told it. Dee saying, was the Hammer of the Waters the creation of the wall? Um, so the Hammer of the Waters, we're told, was this hugely powerful spell. We're told a couple of different legends of where it might have been cast. One of which was the Isle of Faces. Another one is Moat Coleen, which we will come on to. But in both accounts, the idea is to break this land bridge. The intention is to stop humanity flowing through from Essos into Westeros. That's looking very much at the south of the continent. The wall, which we're told that the children's magic was involved in the creation of, is right at the very north of the continent and probably didn't require one massive hit of magic. This was a lot of magic to create kind of barriers. So I don't think they're connected. I think they're looking at separate threats. The Hammer of the Waters was about, from the children's perspective, protecting Westeros from people coming in from the south. The wall is about protecting Westeros from people coming in from the north. Purple Feline, is the Woods Witch or the Ghost of High Heart an albino child of the forest? So this is a long-held fan theory, if you like. So for those who don't know, so the Woods Witch was a close friend of Jenny of Oldstones. Jenny of Oldstones was the woman that Duncan the Small, that's Egg's oldest son, named after the Dunk that we know, he fell in love with her. And when she came to court, she brought with her the Woods Witch. Now, the Woods Witch is described as being very short, 3 foot high. white skin, red eyes. So is this what children of the forest look like? Well, the skin color is different. The children of the forest usually they had sort of brown skin. Dappled is a word which is used for it. Is it possible that this is just weird coloration to give white skin to one, as you say, albino, as you'd say in America? Um, I mean, it's possible. I think it's very likely that she was either a child of the forest or part child of the forest. If you looked on the map for where Old Stones is, it's not too far from the neck, which is where we suspect that there may still be children of the forest. And in this kind of arc, which I've described a few times, but if you imagine the Riverlands, there's this kind of like broad curve coming down from the neck of places that are still strongly related to the old gods. Obviously, we've got the Isle of Faces, and then we've got Raventree Hall, we've got High Heart. Old Stones is another of those places. This kind of arc coming down. This is where the worship of the old gods continued. So she's definitely in some way from the old gods. I think that the colouring is specifically uh, supposed to be telling us that this is connected to Bloodraven, white skin, red eyes. Is she a child of the forest? Uh, yes, probably, I think. Maura Lee, what kind of role, if any, hi there, Maura, by the way, if any, will the children play in helping to understand the role of the others in the books? So, yeah, our working theory that I kind of addressed a moment ago is that the others were created by the children, which means that the children understand how to, or potentially understand how to uncreate them. So, what role will they play? Well, they will want people, they don't work in Westeros anymore. There aren't many of them. Humanity will distrust them. Uh, they work through humans who they can influence, control, trust. This is where Bran fits in. They will want to make sure that Bran understands what's going on, what the stakes are, where the others came from, how we can defeat them. This is, if you remember, right all the way back to Bran's first kind of magical chapter. He's in his coma back in book one. He's in his coma, and he has these dreams. You know, the dreams when we get the three-eyed crow there, and falling through the air. You've got to fly. All of that kind of stuff. In that, Bran is the voice, the three-eyed crow, is trying to persuade Bran of why this is important. And Bran kind of looks out across the world and he sees various things. And then he looks north and he looks to the heart of winter, and what he saw scared him. That is the driving force for this. That is what the Children of the Forest, Three-Eyed Crow, want from Bran. They want him to understand the threat, and they want to give him the ability to influence the response in some way. So that is what their role is. They are going to operate behind the scenes. They're not suddenly going to come out. There's not going to be a Children of the Forest army suddenly appearing. They're going to be influencing things through, primarily through Bran, but also through other people like Bloodraven, like Howland Reed, for example. And they are going to be helping humanity defeat the others. Which, if you go all the way back to the first Long Night, that was their role then as well. They humanity was facing them. The last hero goes off with his companions to seek the help of the Children of the Forest. And the Children of the Forest, reading between the lines, they gave him Dragonglass, and he used that to be helping defeat them. So That's the role they have, not front and center, but influencing things. James Perkins, do we have any information in the text that sheds more light on how Moat Cailin was built, why it was abandoned, and when all of this took place with regard to other key historical events like the Second Hammer of the Waters, the Pact, and the Andal invasion? So Moat Cailin is the castle that sits in the neck over the causeway. There's only one way that you can kind of move north-south along this causeway, and Moat Cailin is the castle that sits over that. What clues, hints do we have in the text about when this might have been built? Well, the children of the forest did not build stone castles. That's not what they did. So this is not a construction from the children of the forest. And I think this is one of those times, actually, when we can... George R. R. Martin tells us that the legends of the past we should not take as literal truth. These are things which are passed down generation to generation, oral tradition. Things get missed out, things get changed, things get exaggerated, and so on. This idea that the children of the forest cast some magic from Moat Cailin, for me, that strikes me as one of those things that just doesn't make sense unless it's in a kind of a legendary form, because the castle was not built by them. Would it have been built earlier by humans? Well, potentially, but the key characteristic of Moat Cailin is that it faces south. The idea is that this is protecting the north from someone. So all of that suggests that this was built once the north was an entity in and of itself. So not by the children, not during the Age of Heroes or anything like that, but after the Starks had broadly united the North as Kings of Winter. One of the recalcitrant kings lived, what was the predecessor of the Crannogmen, lived in the Neck. Now, if Moat Cailin had been built by them at any point during this period, surely it would have been built to also protect from the north, because at that time the bigger threat to them was from the north, which implies it was built later. So if I had to pick when it was built, it was after we get this alliance between Winterfell and the Neck, the Crannogmen, which we're told happened. This was sealed with marriage. And that created a unified North in some way. And the Starks wanted the North to be defended against anyone from the south. And that was probably when Moat Cailin arrived. We know it happened before the Andal invasion. The Andals invaded south of the Neck, and they several times tried to head north, but they threw themselves against the walls of Moat Cailin, and the Andals never made it north of the Neck. So that is when I would place it. The fact is that it has sunk into the swamps quite quickly. We don't know when it was last used as a proper defensive structure, but it makes sense it was up to round about the invasion, Aegon's invasion, because up to that point, then the north was always potentially at threat from the south. After that, everyone was a part of one big, massive, happy Seven Kingdoms, and so the north did not need to worry about defending itself from the south anymore. So that strikes me as the moment at which this started to fall into ruin, and it is fallen into ruin. It is still a death trap for anyone trying to come from the south, but the walls have crumbled. The infrastructure has started to sink down into the swamp. There's a fantastic description of it when this is from one of Cat's chapters when they arrive there and Cat is there saying it's still a death trap, but the rocks of the stones are sinking down into this marshland. So that's where it is. After the North was united, before the Andal invasion. Let's go to Hermione saying, hello, Robert. And Dan, the Dapper Dog. The Green Men were mentioned last time about the Isle of Faces. Do you think the children are also present on the Isle of Faces? Are the Green Men maybe descendants of the children? Speaking of descendants of the children, do you believe that Cranach men are? I've covered the Cranach men issue already. Are there children of the forest on the Isle of Faces? Possibly. The Isle of Faces, we're told, is small. It's a small island. That's basically the only bit of information we have. There are weirwoods on there, and it is a small island. My working theory, which I went through, I'm not going to bore you with all the details now, is that the Green Men are something akin to Cold Hands. They're undead in some kind of way, which is how they can survive on the Isle of Faces. They never have to go off. They don't have to go and talk to other people. They don't have to go and get food from anywhere else. They can just subsist on what's going on there. If there are children of the forest there, they are that there's only some, because they never go beyond the island, and the island is small. If I had to guess, probably yes, but they're not the main inhabitants there. Every time we get this reference, it's Howland Reed went to the Isle of Faces and met with the Green Men. And Valerion lands and talked to the Green Men. No one ever says, and the Children of the Forest, who were also there. So maybe there are some, but it's not a significant factor. Catherine Furseth. Hi, Robert. What will happen to the Children of the Forest in Bloodraven's cave? Will any of them survive? Will they help Bran get south? Also, do you think these are the only ones left alive north of the wall? So maybe there are others north of the wall. We don't know. The haunted forest is massive. You can walk for days and days and days, weeks even, through the haunted forest. So it's entirely possible that there are children there somewhere in the depths of the forest. But probably the main base for them is what we think of as Bloodraven's Cave. And although we call it Bloodraven's Cave, it's not really Bloodraven's Cave. This is just the cave that Bloodraven is in. All the evidence we've got, when Bran is there and he arrives, and in order to get to Bloodraven, he's kind of like crawling through this cave system and realizes there's bones everywhere. And when he's looking around via Hodor, he sees that there are children of the forest, like we see Bloodraven, just kind of hooked up to the Weirwood network, but they're there. Being kept alive is really the only way to say it. That their eyes are moving and can see him, but they're trapped, their bodies withering away. So it's not Bloodraven's cave, it's the cave that he went to. This was the Children of the Forest's cave for a very long time. Perhaps you could even say it was the Weirwood, because it's not just one Weirwood, there are Weirwood trees, plural, on the top of that hill. So they are there. There are clearly some alive and well, Children of the Forest. We meet Leaf and a few others. There might be others elsewhere, but this, I would guess, is their main base north of the wall. Adam Geets, can you provide an update on the Traveller's Guide? You said you were going to update them based on the stage play, but that has been very quiet. When can we expect to see those videos again? Okay, so yeah, the Traveller's Guide, for those who are newer to the channel, one of the video series I did ages ago was the Traveller's Guide to Westeros that some people quite liked. Now, I took down those videos with the intention of putting them back up again. It is still my intention. What I wanted to do with that and the Roberts Rebellion playlist was to wait until we had a little bit more information. And the information we're going to get is probably primarily from the Iron Throne, which is the stage play that George R. R. Martin has commissioned based on the tourney at Harrenhal. Now, yes, it has been a while since we've heard from this. The last we heard was nearly a year ago now, and what we heard then was that it was progressing well. They were talking to theatres in London. So the idea seems to be that it was going to debut in London and then probably go to New York and then Australia and then around the world. Now London works for me, so I'm very happy about this, but I understand that for many people, it's a long way away. But we've not heard anything about this for a while. So what is happening? I wish I could give you some inside information. The only information I have is that George R. R. Martin has been in Europe these last few days and weeks. If you've been following his Not a blog, you will notice that he's been quite quiet recently. He is always quiet when he travels. And he was in Iceland for a bit doing a literary festival. He was in Berlin, I'm going to say 3 weeks ago, something like that, for the premiere, for the German premiere of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. He came to the UK, speaking at, I think it was Oxford Union, might have been Cambridge Union, I can't remember. He's keeping this kind of on the down low, which I completely understand. We're getting a few hints about what's going on, but when he is in the UK, when he's around London, he does tend to meet people. He's got a lot of friends in London. London, if you're from other continents, London is kind of a hub in Europe. It's very easy to get to. So if he wants to meet people, then you can easily get there. So if when he was there, he often meets his UK editors. He often meets some actors. We know he met, I've forgotten her name right now, but the actress who played Shay when he was in Berlin. And he just meets some other writing friends. So the people who are producing the Iron Throne, the stage play, are in London. So it would not surprise me if we get an update at some point soon on his Not a blog to say, here are my travels. He does do this when he sort of travels abroad. He does kind of like give us a little rundown of the good and bad things that happened to him. So I'm expecting an update at some point soon. But in any event, I'm going to try and get the Traveller's Guide and start to get the Roberts Rebellion playlist, which I know a lot of people also have been asking me about. I'm going to try and get them back up again. I think that the only thing I'm waiting for now is that stage play. I don't want to wait forever. I will get them back up. Which was kind of a long, rambling answer to that one, but I hope that helped. Alhad, I liked your idea in the last live stream that the green men of the Isle of Faces are undead people like Cold Hands. What is your theory about people in the House of the Undying? Are they also almost undead? They seem to be using Shade of the Evening Tree magic. Yes. So if we go with this working theory, which I'm talked through a little bit ago, that the Shade of the Evening Tree is this kind of warped version of the Weirwoods, cut off from the main Weirwood network. If we go with that theory, then the same sort of magic must happen with the Shade of the Evening as happens with the Weirwood network. What does that look like? Well, if you have the Weirwood paste, then you can see out through the Weirwood trees and you can see visions and things like that. That certainly seems to happen with the Shade of the Evening um, kind of sap drink. And the Weirwood network, if you hook yourself up to the Weirwood network, as we saw in Bloodraven's Cave, then that can extend your life. So Bloodraven at this point is well over 100. He is being kept alive by the Weirwood network. That certainly seems to be what's going on with in the House of the Undying, in a warped, different, but still kind of the same way. So the Warlocks, they've got the blue lips, they're drinking the Shade of the Evening, they have some magic. But the Undying, who were like, if you remember Danny's trip through that, they were kind of like the final boss of that. They are kept alive. There's this kind of giant beating heart. It's very vision like, this kind of giant beating heart, which seems to be keeping them alive. So there is something which is keeping them alive in the same way that the Weirwood network is keeping those children of the forest alive, but they're only barely alive. So yes, this is the kind of the dark, corrupted version of what's going on with the Weirwood network. Let's have a quick flick through the chat. To people wondering why their names have got random numbers after them. I don't know why. YouTube have done that. Also, I did ask this a while ago. I mean, I don't know. Maybe somebody can help. And if you can, put it down in the comments, not just in a live chat. There's a new feature called Hype that I've literally no idea how this works. Can you hype this video? Do I want my video to be hyped? I'm not entirely sure. But it sounds like it's probably a good thing. The algorithm probably likes it. I'm trying to find out from YouTube what this is, but if you know, let me know down there. And if there's something I can do about it, that'd be good. But the numbers after your name, I do not know why either. I sometimes feel like I'm kind of fumbling through this forest. I don't quite understand exactly how YouTube works, but about a month or two ago, everyone's usernames got some numbers after them. I don't know why, but that's what's going on. Let's flick through studio tour, Game of Thrones studio tour. Yeah, there is a Game of Thrones studio tour up in Northern Ireland. A few people in the chat are talking about this. If you remember, then Game of Thrones was filmed in Northern Ireland, and so they've opened this up where they were filming it. They've got lots of original costumes, the Iron Throne, things like that. I, shockingly, given how easily I could theoretically get to Northern Ireland, have never been. I'm going to try to rectify that this year, and when I do, I will send you some pictures and stuff like that. Right, we've got Yul Elson gifting 5 IDG live memberships. Thank you very much. Yeah, I talked about the memberships a little bit ago. If you are a member for a while, I don't know how long, then you can gift those memberships to other people. So thank you very much for that. That's very kind. Let's go to Dagan saying, hi, new subscriber and love your channel. Welcome. It seems the three-eyed crow is north of the wall to keep an eye on the others. The Isle of Faces is sacred and well protected, so wondering why he isn't on the Isle, if he's as important to the children as it appears. Perhaps there's something or someone even more important on the Isle that does need protection, and the three-eyed crow is merely serving this. So Yeah, it's an interesting question. So, the Isle of Faces is clearly a mystery. We talked about it a lot last week, but our best guess at the moment is that in some way this is the heart of the Weirwood network, the hub, something along those lines. We've never even heard a rumor that there was like a person there, like a really, here's the owner of all of this, the king. We've never heard anything along those lines. So I think for the moment we have to assume that the important thing about the Isle of Faces is the Isle of Faces itself. As for Bloodraven, why is he north of the wall? Well, uh, because at the risk of sounding slightly tautological, that's where he was and is. He went to the wall. He was sent to the wall by Egg, the new King Aegon V. He was sent up to the wall, became Lord Commander, and then headed north of the wall, ranging, and disappeared. And we know ended up there in what we now think of as Bloodraven's Cave. So that was the place that they could hook him up to the Weirwood network, as it were. Now, we don't know exactly how this happened. We don't know whether he was kind of called north of the wall, whether he just went exploring himself, whether he had some kind of green dreams about it. We don't know any of that level of detail. We just know that he headed north. And when he got there, who knows what conversations they had, but somewhere along the line, one of them was said, well, if you sit yourself down there, then you can hook yourself up into the Weirwood network and you can see everything that's going on and everything that's ever gone on. And I'm sure he would have loved that. It's worth remembering when Bloodraven went north of the wall, he was 77 years old. So he wasn't a young man anymore. So the idea, at the risk of being flippant about this, the idea of him, after a really long, hard trudge, many weeks heading north into the cold, of being told, have a sit down here. Um, you don't have to move for a while. We'll bring you a nice rug. That probably would have appealed to him. It's not like he was this young man who had to be up and about and doing things himself. He'd moved himself into a position where he was going to be influencing events from afar rather than being at the heart of things himself. So, why there? Because that's where he was. I hope that makes sense. Dagan also asked, do you think the children are Earth others? The others physically embody ice. Ice magic. Their language is ice cracking on a winter lake. The Roinar had water wizards, though we don't know their language, and we don't have an equivalent for fire yet, but R'hllor embodies fire magic. Um, so the children seem to embody an element or part of the natural world. They understand its language and can claim its power as their own. The children seem to physically embody earth magic, and their language is like a bubbling brook or the wind through the leaves. We don't know where they came from. But do you think they may have originally been different and that they became earth others? Like if like in the show they created the others, then they would know the process. So um, are the children of the forest representatives of earth magic, and the others representatives of ice magic, and the priest of R'hllor representatives of fire magic? Well, I think on one level, obviously and clearly, yes, that they do seem to have these different types of magic going on. But, and I've been promising this for about 5 years now. I think at some point I will do a video on how magic works. But I think the headline is that there are two types of magic. There's the kind of natural magic that just seems to happen whether you want it or not. Um, what I mean by that is green dreams, skin changing, dragon dreams, even. Um, these are things that it's just a natural part of who you are. You don't go to sleep saying, I really, really, really want a green dream tonight. You don't wake up in the morning saying, I really, really, really want a bond with a boar or a wolf or whatever. It's either there or it isn't. You're not in control of it. It's just a thing that happens. That's the first type of magic. The second type of magic seems very intentional. You are trying to do a thing, and um, you're looking into the flames because and you're learning and studying how to interpret what you see there. You're wanting to bring somebody back from the dead. You're wanting to create some kind of magical ladder that you can climb up. Whatever it is, the intention is there. So those seem to be broadly the two types of magic, but magic as a whole seems to work the same regardless of what type. It's not an elemental kind of thing. There are echoes between the magic of the others and the magic of the children, which probably is, if they were created by the children, is because that is the children are giving them that kind of magic. Which sort of digression, not really the question you're answering or asking, but this is the other thing in terms of the kind of soft evidence that the others were created by the children, is that the others seem to have a kind of a dark version of the magic of the old gods, by which we mean they can skin change, but the skin changes we know, take Bran as an example, they can skin change into live animals, live humans. The others seem to be able to skin change into dead animals and dead humans. So that seems like a dark version of what's already there. As if, and again, we don't know the extent to which the TV show was right on this, but if they were created, if they created the others from a human, if that human happened to be a green seer, then the green seer then would keep some part of that magic, but a twisted, dark, icy version of it. So, if you're talking about fire as in terms of elements, then I think one of the biggest struggles you have if you're trying to say, well, who represents this element or that element, is that there's more than one group that would represent any given element, and they would claim no connection with them whatsoever. The Roinar was an example you used. Yes, the Roinish people, they clearly had water magic. There's also some kind of water magic within the Narrow Sea. We get told of Mer people, but also what happened with Matchface being brought back from the dead. And over on the other side, we've got the Ironborn, who claim their own religion and type of magic, bringing people back from the dead. So that's all just water magic. Fire magic is not just the priests of R'hllor. We've also got fire magicians in Karth. We've got the pyromancers in King's Landing. And obviously we've got the Valyrians themselves. All of their magic was fire and blood. So we've got a lot of different types of magic, or a lot of different types of people using the same kind of element, as you were. And all of the elements seem to broadly follow the same rules, which seems to imply that there's an overall structure going on here that George R. R. Martin doesn't want to tell us all the details of, because he doesn't like explaining all of his world, but it seems to operate on the same kind of principles. Great Khan saying, I've been listening to reruns of your live streams as I ride through Vietnam. Wow. As I ride through Vietnam. It's an incredible place, but it's so nice to hear from another native English speaker. Love your work, mate. Give Dan a scratch. Well, thank you. I will definitely give Dan a scratch. And thank you for the kind words. Riding through Vietnam sounds amazing. I've never been to Vietnam, but everything I've seen of it looks beautiful and astonishing. So yeah, it's definitely on the list. But yeah, every blessing to you. I hope you have a fantastic time, whatever you're doing there in Vietnam. Let's go to a question from Yeldenil, saying, "Hi, Robert. Can you tell us what we know about the Children of the Forest's way of life before the first men came to Westeros? What was their civilization like? Did they live all together in communities or spread out all over the continent? What was their tax policy?" Just kidding with the last one, but good question. So, what we're told in the World of Ice and Fire, it's from the Maesters, but this is the best we've got, is this. They lived in a manner we might call crude today, yet they were still less barbarous than the giants being the other of the two original inhabitants of Westeros. They worked no metal, but they had great art in working obsidian, what the small folk called dragonglass, to make tools and weapons for hunting. They wove no cloths, but were skilled in making garments of leaves and bark. They learned to make bows of weirwood and to construct flying snares of grass, and both of the sexes hunted with these. So this feels, in terms of a societal structure, very much kind of like a hunter-gatherer. They're getting whatever food they need. They haven't got great industry, so they don't do metal. They don't seem to have any buildings or structures of the like. They live in the forests, in hollow hills, in the cranugs. They, as far as we could tell, did indeed live right across Westeros. They didn't have cities per se, but there do seem to be some hubs where a lot of them were, so these hollow hills in particular. It seems a very simple and humble lifestyle. So there's no farming that we know of, no industry that we know of, just beings living in harmony with nature. So that's pretty much all we know. And when humanity came in, men were the opposite of that. They wanted to chop down trees and nature. They wanted to create farms and villages and towns. They wanted to hunt with whatever metallic weapons they could produce from their small industries. This was a very different kind of culture. So, as far as we can tell, the Children of the Forest have kind of stayed like that. The descriptions we get still seem to imply no metal, but they're not weaving fine clothing or anything like that. Leaves and bark is where they're at. Lorelei Dragon. Good evening, Robert. I hope you're well and keeping warm. I am, thank you. I have a couple of questions. The magic attributed to the children in the books strikes me as full of ritual, intention, sacrifice, and often large in scale. The Hammer of the Waters, the Wall, etc. Yet on the show, there were children depicted shooting fireballs from their hands. What do you think the magic of the children is like? Is it functionally different from other magics we see in the story? Well, just on the fireballs, I think, from memory, I've not rewatched the episode, but I think they were the equivalent of Gandalf's fiery pine cones. I think that's what was going on there. We're not talking about literally fireball. They put something on fire and threw it. But it was an incendiary device, so it kind of exploded on impact. That was certainly the feel I got. I don't think they felt the need to explain that hugely on the show, so I think that's probably about as far as we can go. As for their magic, yeah, we learn of some big magics, but the principles seem to be the same as for other magic, in as much as the two big principles for most magics, other than the natural stuff that we've already covered off, is intentionality and sacrifice. There always has to be a cost to the magic. Now, we're told that when the Hammer of the Waters was cast, then there were lots of hundreds of people sacrificed, children sacrificed, humans sacrificed. So that's the big end of it. The smaller end of it seems to be the more natural stuff. So we know that they were skin changers. We know that they could hook themselves up to the Weirwood network. They're green seers. There were green seers among them. And so that was the more kind of like day-to-day natural magic that we've got. They could perhaps talk to themselves through nature, that kind of thing. We don't know the details of it, but that's the kind of feel we have. But if they wanted to do something in particular, then they kind of click into this other magic zone where we get the sacrifice and we get the intentionality. Laura Dragon also saying, this was sparked by last week's stream. I asked what you thought the green men were, and you shared the idea that they are undead, similar to cold hands, which I found quite persuasive. Good. Do you think it's possible that the presence of the others in Westeros could be an unintended consequence of the children creating the green men? I mean, I don't think unintended consequence of that. I think that this is a hint to the idea that they knew how that magic worked and then they just went big on it. So if we are working down this idea that it started with cold hands, the children somehow did something to cold hands. Cold hands, as far as we can tell, was a member of the Night's Watch, perhaps one of the Raven's Teeth, loyal to Bloodraven, but that's not important to our understanding of the magic, because he was killed and they kind of like kept him half alive. He was dead. It's very clear he's dead. He doesn't have to eat. He doesn't breathe. We're told, it's kind of gruesome thought, but the blood drains down into the hands. It turns black. That kind of stuff. So he is undead in some way, which, if we accept the fact that that is Children of the Forest magic, as he claims and seems likely, then you say, okay, so that is magic. They know how to do the undead magic. The leap of logic next is to the green men. I posited it last week that this might be what they were. It makes sense to me. I don't have any specific evidence to say that that's the case, other than a little bit of imagery that George R. Martin uses. Elks are mentioned both in relation to Cold Hands and also with the Green Men. So there's a little bit of a hint, perhaps, that George R. Martin is wanting us to think of one when we're reading about the other. And if you say that they knew that, the Green Men seem to have been created around the time of the Pact to be protecting the Isle of Faces. If they knew that, that means they've known this kind of magical technology for thousands of years, which means that the potential is there that they could have used it to create the others, or give the others the ability to create whites, or whatever it is. They understand the undead, which is kind of dark, but yeah, it kind of works. So is this some evidence that the others were an unintended consequence? I think not, because the big magic that they did always seemed to have some kind of intentionality and cost to it. I think instead this is evidence that they knew how to do this kind of magic, and they just decided to do it big this time because they just needed to stop the humans. Let's have a quick flick through the chat. Okami Memo saying, hello, Robert. I always pop in to let you know that I'll be catching this to fall asleep later. As always, thank you so much for all the work and especially the live streams. Well, thank you very much. And I hope you get to sleep. If you use these live streams to get to sleep, you might want to check out In Deep Sleep, which is my channel where I kind of just lean into this. People fall asleep to these live streams and also the videos I do over on the main channel. I'm okay with that. I'm not even slightly offended by it. So do not worry. If you use these to go to sleep, that's great as far as I'm concerned. In leaning into that, I've created another channel. It's quite a small channel, but it's quite fun to do. I take these live streams and some other stuff I've done and strip out the audio so it's just me talking, but then put it to something soothing, maybe a little bit of background noise. I don't know, the wind outside, a crackling log fire, whatever, a little bit of imagery. It kind of fades to black, and it's got a whole 8 hours. I try and do them for about 8 hours with no interruptions. There's no adverts in the middle of those videos at all. There never will be. That's not the point. It's just a long video for you to fall asleep to. So if you would find that helpful to get to sleep, then please do that. I'm trying to. I did a little bit of catching up. I'm trying to do it now so that it's something like 3 weeks after it airs on here, it'll appear on there. So there's now a little bit of a back catalogue. I've been uploading a couple a week. So yeah, go and check that out. While I'm at it, what should I do? I should all the things I need to remember to say. Um, Moderators. I've not thanked moderators. That's it. Moderators, you do a fantastic job. Thank you so much. If you're watching this live, please just show a little bit of love to the moderators because they are amazing. Genuinely fantastic. So yeah, please do let them know that you appreciate them. And I've already talked about Patreon. I've talked about Night of the Seven Kingdoms. Is that all I need to talk about? If you want to get the videos on my main channel, they're now starting to appear everywhere. So I'm uploading my back catalogue. It's already on Spotify. Doing them onto Apple as kind of podcast, just the audio, and wherever you get your podcast from. Facebook, I'm sure some other places. So do go and check that out if you find it easier to access my stuff somewhere else. Do go check that out. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, let's do that. Let's go back to this. I think I had a question from Great Khan. Again, thank you very much. What is the Hammer of the Waters? Is it a physical hammer or was it an action? It was used twice, we are told or suspect, by the Children of the Forest. Are we going to see a repeat of this in the main series? Okay, so this is the name of the spell, as far as we can tell. Whether it is what they called it, probably is just what the humans called it. And all of this is legend. So we don't know exactly. We're told that a mighty magic. Actually, let me see. I might be able to quote you because this is always the best way. Let's see. Let's see whether we can do some live research. So. So the breaking. The breaking took place in a single night, whether it took place in a single night or over the course of centuries. And here we go. Most scholars agree. Essos and Westeros were once joined. 1,000 tales and runic records tell of the crossing of the first men. Today the seas divide them. This is what it says in the World of Ice and Fire. This is what the Maester's account is. Today the seas divided them. So plainly some version of the event that the Dornish called the breaking must have occurred. Did it happen in the space of a single day? As the songs would have it, was it the work of the Children of the Forest and the sorcerer of the Greenseers? These things are less certain. Archmaester Cassander suggests it was just a slow rising of the waters over hundreds of years. melting of the ice caps, whatever. So that is where we're at. The Maesters agree that there used to be this land bridge between Westeros and Essos, and some of the legends, and there isn't anymore. There's just a whole load of little islands. Some of the legends we have say that the children of the forest cast this spell, the Hammer of the Waters, which in one fell swoop just shattered that land bridge. Now, you have to imagine that the idea that we've got here is that this was a huge magic spell to create pent up water just smashing down. And when we're saying land bridge, this is probably miles across. This is quite a huge, substantial bit of land that just got smashed to nothingness, to just a few islands. The legend goes that the children cast that in order to prevent humanity from coming across. So then we get this kind of less certain rumor that there was a second one which was trying to do the same, cutting the north off from the rest, which is where the neck comes from. We get a couple of different rumors about where this was all cast from. Not a physical hammer then. This is water doing the magic. This is whichever way you wish to cut the idea of the children of the forest's magic, then it is natural magics. They're using natural elements in some way. Are we going to see a repeat of it? Now, I think probably the answer is no. Because we're told that this great magic, whatever it was, required hundreds, thousands of sacrifices. And we don't have them anymore. Also, it required many green seers, and we don't have them anymore. My usual clarification, it's really important because we often get in the wrong mindset with this, is that the TV show gave us this idea that the Three-Eyed Raven was a job title. You're now the Three-Eyed Raven. That's not the case. The Three-Eyed Crow was just Bloodraven's avatar in the kind of the Green Dream world when he was trying to get Bran to come to him. He didn't even know that that's what he looked like there. Bran says the Three-Eyed Crow, and Bloodraven's like, huh? Oh yeah, I suppose that makes sense. Yeah, 3 eyes, crow. Yeah, okay. So it's not a job title. The job title, if there is one, is Greenseer, and there were many of them among the children of the forest, but there aren't now. And this probably is at least part of the reason why Bloodraven was brought north of the wall, hooked up to the Weirwood network, because the children of the forest, they didn't have any more children who could be that Greenseer. They wanted someone, and then Bloodraven, as part of the First Men, or with blood of the First Men flowing through him, he's half from House Blackwood, not just Targaryen. He was a Greenseer, so they tempted him, invited him, brought him north of the wall, and hooked him up to the Weirwood network. So that was what was going on there. All of which is a long way around to say that the children of the forest do not have lots of Greenseers now. They do not have lots of people that they could sacrifice right now. The idea that they might do some massive magic, yeah, maybe they might sacrifice other people, but they've not got, if we're just using our kind of like colloquial fantasy language, they've not got the wizards to do it. That kind of thing requires a lot of magical power. They just don't have that anymore. Let's go to Maura Lee. What do you think will be the children's main roles, if any, in the last 2 books? How will they continue to support Bran's Greenseer training? And Purple Feline asking what role they will have in the endgame and after. Well, the role they had in the first long night, despite them being not quite at full power, but still a significant force in Westeros, was behind the scenes. They influenced things. They helped humanity. The legend of the last hero is a legend. It almost certainly didn't happen exactly like we read, with him setting off with his companions and his dog and whatever. But if you were to take the heart of that story and say, well, there must be some truth in this, the heart of that story is humanity was in a bad way. The others were winning, and the children of the forest helped. So that seems to be the core of what was going on then, and is very probably the core of what is going on now. The children of the forest will not play a central role in as much as they're not going to be front and center. We're not going to see a battalion of children of the forest attacking the others. They are going to be influencing events. They are training up Bran via Bloodraven to be a green seer, to be able to do the magicy things that they need getting done. So they are going to be there focused in on training him up. And although we're not going to get the exact same thing as happened in TV show, when it was like, you now are the three-eyed raven, go, and you now need to download all this information. That's not what it's going to be. He's going to learn how to do the magic stuff, and then at some point he's going to be leaving. Which leads me to the question from Lady Pushkin saying, what do you think will be the catalyst to Bran and co leaving the cage? The cage? The cave. A little bit of a oh, anyway, you know what I mean. I always forget words, and normally I forget Freudian slip. That's what I was trying to say. Normally I forget details about Song of Ice and Fire. This time it was Freudian slip that I forgot. Anyway, how much of a role do you see the Children of the Forest having in the end game? And after was Feline, and then Lady Pushkins was asking about whether or how they're going to leave Bran and co. If it's a break and breaking of the magic or the force field, how will this happen? So I have to say, this was one of those things in the TV show that I was fascinated by when it happened, and it felt like, at the time, it felt like a book thing, um, because it was shown, but they didn't really ever kind of like describe the ins and outs of it. If you remember, what happened was Bran was going through the Weirwood network. He was looking at stuff. He sort of went out on his own. He saw the others. He saw the Night King, and the Night King just grabbed him there on his arm in the Green Dream. And then he kind of woke up and he'd been marked. And it was like, oh no, now this means that there's a connection between the two of you, which means that the others can get past this barrier and they can come and invade this cave that we've got. That all felt a little bit kind of, as I say, show not tell. We weren't told any of the details of this. What we were shown, which was in the books, is that there's some kind of force field around the cave that had been there for a while. And we know it had been there for a while because outside the cave there were the whites waiting, and they were buried under the snow. It's as if they'd just been like switched off, and they were there. They would be triggered into action if somebody tried to come into or go out of the cave, but they couldn't enter in. So many people have theorized, and it kind of makes sense, that the same kind of magic that is there we have at the wall, because the wall, for whatever reason, it seems that you can't magical things, the undead, whatever, cannot pass through. Cold Hands is very clear, he cannot go beyond the wall. We're told that it is a magical barrier. The Children of the Forest cast their spells on it. This is another Children of the Forest place, so it seems sort of the same kind of magical spell in some kind of way. And on the show, the fact that a bond was created between Bran and the Night King meant that the others could pass through that. Is that going to happen in the books? I mean, I'm sure not exactly the same. But the other clue we have is Hodor, which George R. R. Martin has confirmed is going to happen roughly like that. The wordplay is the same. He is holding the door. The difference is that he's not literally holding a door. He is going to be holding a doorway in the more colloquial sense that he's there, probably with a sword, protecting it so that other people can escape. The principle is the same, though. He is there sacrificing himself, um, protecting people who are escaping. So that tells me that probably Bran and Mira, we assume, will, because he will need somebody if Hodor's not going to be there, somebody will need to be carrying him out. Um, they are going to escape in some way, and Hodor is going to protect their escape. That seems to imply, given the fact that the working assumption that they all seem to have is that Bran is going to stay there, means that something will happen to make that barrier come down. So, thus far, all of the chains of logic are going in the same direction. What is going to happen? It's not going to be something that Bloodraven does. He's got no interest in doing that. It's not going to be something that the Children of the Forest do. They don't seem. Well, why would they want the others to be invading where they are? Everything points to this being something Bran does, and it's a magical barrier, so it's a magical thing that he does. So, although we don't know the exact mechanism going on here, all the bits of logic that we've had, the only person who seems to have any chance of stop breaking down this magical barrier is Bran. Um, uh, Clearly, they get invaded in some way because Hodor is protecting them. And this does seem to be the same kind of magic as we've got at the wall. All of that added together suggests something similar to what happened on the TV show. Whether it's exactly the same, we don't know. But how will it happen? What will be the catalyst? It's going to be an unexpected thing. They're not planning on doing this. They are going to run away because Bran does something. I think the only other option is that they get so freaked out, they being Bran and Mira, get so freaked out by what's going on there that they are running away and escaping from the Children of the Forest. But that seems way less likely. So, yeah, something similar is the short answer. Buttoned up reader picking up a question from the chat. Oh, I love it when people do this. Thank you very much. The chat goes through so quickly, I can't always pick up everything that's there. So when people do this in super chats and the like, it means that I can see it more easily. So thank you. Do you think Bloodraven willingly joined the Weirwood network? Yes. I think he sat down there. I think he loves magic. As I say, he was 77 when he went north of the wall. He's no longer a young man wanting to run around. His entire interest through most of his life has been gathering information, influencing things from behind the scenes. So this would have felt exactly what he wants. As an old man, he's not going to go and run around and do the glamoured up looking somebody else kind of thing anymore. He's increasingly influencing events through other people. I think the clue we've got is that he's not held there by anyone like they're not guarding him with spears pointing at him. I'm not going to escape. What's keeping him there now is the fact that he's hooked up to the tree, and the tree roots have been growing. It's quite when you actually think about it, it's quite a gruesome description. The tree roots are growing through him. Tree roots don't grow very quickly, so he has sat there relatively still for a very long time when he perhaps could have got up. So I think it was voluntary. Do the others create balance? It can't be a coincidence that at one end of the world, a woman was stabbed in the heart to create a weapon of fire, and at the other, a man was stabbed to create a weapon of ice. So this is when the woman stabs in the heart to create a weapon of fire. This, I assume you're referring to the Azor Ahai myth with Nisa Nisa, where he plunges his sword into her heart, and that forges Lightbringer. And the other, a man was stabbed to create a weapon of ice. I assume that you're thinking on the TV show with the creation of the others, the Night King. Is it a coincidence? I don't think it is a coincidence. Is it balance? Well, thematically, as a book, George R. Martin has said, I mean, this was many years ago, but he has often said he took inspiration from the Robert Frost poem, Fire and Ice, which is about. I used to know it off by heart. It's quite a short poem, but it's about two opposing forces, both of which, fire and ice, both of which could destroy the world. And we shouldn't, although we might think, oh, fire is that's the bad one because that burns things up, but ice can destroy things just as easily. So that is a kind of a balance thing, and he's basically suggesting that in order for humanity, for the world to survive, both fire and ice have to be dealt with, pushed back in some way. And that certainly seems to be when he initially set out on this story. That seems to be the kind of the feel that he had. That when you read his original proposal for what was a trilogy back then, it was book one. We have civil war in Westeros, humans fighting humans, which means that they're not paying attention to what's going on outside of that. Book two, the dragons attack. We have fire attacking Westeros. Book three, we get ice attack. We get the others coming in. And the implication is in order for us to reach some kind of resolution in this story, then both fire and ice have to be dealt with. Now, what dealt with means, well, it could have a myriad of meanings, but potentially kill, potentially undo whatever magic is there creating them, potentially they withdraw and leave humanity alone for a while. But they need to go. So that, in that sense, yes, 100% we're talking about balance here. I don't think necessarily that we should take either of the things you name check there as literal truth. The creation of Lightbringer would work if we're saying George R. Martin doesn't want us to take these legends as literal truth. If we're taking this as some kind of legend about the creation of the magical weapon that will help destroy the others. What is the magical weapon which will destroy the others? Valyrian steel? Probably. What is it about the creation of Valyrian steel? Well, all of Valyrian magic was to do with blood and fire, which seems to imply that this might be a magical story about Lightbringer, of course, being the fiery blade, and then the blood was from the sacrifice. That in order to forge this, you need some sacrifice. We don't know exactly how Valyrian steel was forged, but fire and blood seems like a pretty good place to start. And the creation of the Night King, as I say, that was a show thing. We do not know at the moment the extent to which that is how George R. Martin would imagine it. If we assume that they were right in the others being a creation of the Children of the Forest, and George R. Martin has never come out to deny that. He's never suggested that, oh wow, from really early on, the whole point of the others, they completely got that wrong. He's never said that. Which implies to me, as this is such a central thing, that probably it's sort of roughly right, but whether the magic that was needed to do it was shoving dragon glass into a man's heart, that bit I don't know, and I suspect it's probably more complicated than that. Martinez saying, good evening, Robert. Just come on. I hope you're well. I am. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. I have got your Patreon question, which is coming up a little bit later. Lady Pushkins, I just answered yours. Orion's Orcas. My question is about the relationship between the Children of the Forest and Bloodraven. What happened? How did that arrogant, pompous, the end justifies the means, Blackfire? Blackfire? No. I'll allow arrogant, pompous, and the end justifies the means, but he was very much anti-Blackfire. How did he become the Three-Eyed Raven? Why do the Children of the Forest accept and seem fine with this relationship? There is a running joke that when in doubt, blame Bloodraven. We might be regretting that statement in many ways. I don't trust him for a second and would love for you to do a deep dive on what Bran is doing in that cave to Hodor. And Summer and the Jojen Paste. These are called abominations in the books. There's always something dark about Bloodraven, and the children could be using both Bloodraven and Bran for something dark as well. So yes, so completely agree about the dark thing. I've talked about this a couple of times recently, but if you read that chapter, I think it's the last Bran chapter we've got in the Dance with Dragons, it is dark on many levels. It's literally dark. The repeated language to show the passage of time is the moon was a crescent, sharp as a knife. It's very clear that this is literally pointed language. We're shown bones, we're shown Bran doing horrible things, but not even thinking about it. We're in a cave with echoes going on around. We don't know exactly what's happened. The hint is that Jojen might have been sacrificed. They're taking this young child and saying, "You're going to be here forever." He's walking into Hodor, not telling anyone, and poor Hodor's there. We get the image of him just like cowering in the corner of his own mind, scared of Bran coming in and taking over. So it's dark. It's 100% dark. So that bit, yes, I would 100% agree. When in doubt, blame Bloodraven. It's a fun phrase, and I stand by it. When in doubt, blame Bloodraven. But I think that we can expand it a little bit to accept the fact that Bloodraven is part now of the Weirwood network. So it's not just Bloodraven doing his own thing. He is there as a part of an even bigger, an even bigger mission than himself. Might the children be using both Bloodraven and Bran for something dark? I think they don't care about Bran as a person. They are using him in as much as they need a green seer, and he's there, and so they're not really going to let him go off and do his own thing. He's their tool to do stuff with, and the stuff he's going to do will potentially be quite dark. So all of that is there and is true. What I'm intrigued by, and this is a writing challenge for George R. R. Martin, is as and when Bran escapes, he is sort of escaping the control of the children of the forest at this point. To what extent is he still himself? On the TV show, they basically say Bran died, and it says a few times, Bran himself says it, that he died in that cave. He's no longer himself. He's now the three-eyed raven. He's basically saying, I'm now a part of the Weirwood network. It's not Bran. Bran's just, his life and memories have been sucked up into the network, and I'm just sort of, he's a part of me, but also these other people are a part of me. That's where they went on the TV show. Are they going to go down, or is George R. R. Martin going to go down something like that in the books? I don't think it's going to be that stark, pun intended. When he leaves, he's not adopting this I am the three-eyed raven persona. Also, it's not like everything has suddenly downloaded itself into his brain. And he doesn't need to be by a weirwood in order to be accessing the weirwood network. So there are going to be differences. But how is that going to play out? What are we actually going to see? How much is he going to know? I think, for what it's worth, the key point is that Bran will be able to see what has happened at any point in history, but he will need to go looking for it. So Bloodraven has told him that he can see out through the eyes of the Weirwood network, but in time he will be able to go beyond the Weirwoods, and he'll be able to see other stuff. He can see things way back through history. In time, Bran will learn to kind of like pick when and where, and then go out and explore stuff. The issue is he needs to know what to look for. He's not suddenly going to have all of the knowledge and experience and understanding the world in his head at one moment in time. He'll have to go and look for it. So, as a sort of example, if he wants to find out how the others were created, he will need to know when and where to look, not just go there. And the only real clue on how this works is when he does have the weirwood paste, and he's told by Bloodraven tells him, okay, now you just have to kind of, in the same way when you skin changed, you kind of like imagined yourself into this other body. You have to do that to the weirwood. And he's talking about a weirwood at the top of the hill, the one that he's connected to. Here's the roots. Just will your way into that, become that weirwood. Bran doesn't access that weirwood. He accesses the Winterfell weirwood, which tells us that immediately he's not tied to there. The weirwood network very probably is all joined up, as we've talked about before, but he's not. He doesn't have to be connected in to right next to that particular weirwood tree. Added to which, later on, he's not touching any weirwood tree when he goes back into the weirwood network. So then he doesn't seem to have much control. He's just like in there, what's going on? He seems to go to automatically places, people and places, because he goes to Winterfell, that he has some kind of connection with. He sees his father. He sees what appears to be Benjen and Lyanna. He sees what appears to be old man kissing a very tall knight, who we think is probably Sedunk. Very probably, then the two of them, that union will result eventually, not immediately, but eventually, a couple of generations later, that will result in Hodor. So he seems to have this kind of link. The furthest back he goes is to somebody else called Bran. So it seems to be the link to someone. Those are the clues that we have as to how this works, but we're told he will be able to go to different places at different times, wherever, whenever. He doesn't just suddenly get the information downloaded to him and know everything. Jule Elson picking up something from Agreed Weirwood and Andrew Kay. Fantastic moderators. Thank you. Saying, I always thought that so how's H.O. how's Winterfell H.O. how I don't even know that H of W. Someone in the chat tell me what that is. Was a response to the creation and propagation of the S of E trees, shade of the evening trees, to stop the roots from invading Westeros. So shade of the evening and ghost grass. Okay. Oh, so H of W, Hammer of the Waters. Thank you. So. Yeah, so this is an interesting thing. So this is the other way round of looking at it, is that this isn't just a matter. This isn't that the Weirwood network was all lovey-dovey, nice, spread everywhere, routes going through the land bridge across to Essos, and then they had to break it. The humans kept coming, and that kind of like polluted the Weirwood trees over in Essos and turn them into Shade of the Evening. That's the kind of the classical interpretation of it. But another way of doing this was that this was actually to protect Westeros not from the humans, because let's face it, they could still come over in boats. It's a pretty a blunt instrument to try and stop the invasion of humanity by destroying a bit of land. But to prevent the potential pollution of the Shade of the Evening and even ghost grass, which is all the way over on the far side of Essos, from coming to Westeros. I like the idea. It's really interesting thing. I think ghost grass is still such a long way away that I don't think that you would cast Hammer of the Waters to protect yourself from ghost grass yet. The idea that you're protecting yourself from the Shade of the Evening trees, as I say, it's an interesting one. They're connected, those two. So you have to ask, why are they different? The Hammer of the Waters kind of breaking the link between the two. They had been linked and then that link was broken. That works for me. But I can kind of understand this idea that there are two completely separate things, and they sort of kind of went, oh, we now see what's going on over there, and we don't want that coming and encroaching here. In the same way that so in the UK, if you're brought up in the UK, you're always told this. As one of the natural history things in the UK is that red squirrels used to be everywhere. Red squirrels, lovely, they're wonderful. However, at some point, who knows where, grey squirrels came in, and grey squirrels took over, and they were nasty squirrels, and they beat up all of the red squirrels, and so the red squirrels have gone, apart from a couple of random islands off of the coast. And that's the sort of the. I'm sure there is some kind of truth to that, but that's the story that if you're brought up in Britain, you're sort of told as a schoolchild, and that kind of feel for, oh, we don't want the nasty Shade of the Evening / grey squirrels coming in here, we'll just stop it. That it makes some kind of sense as well. That was quite random, that red and grey squirrel analogy, but I hope that one worked. Let's go to. I've got a couple more questions, I think. So, friend saying, happy Thursday, and to you too. Drawing yet another comparison between The Song of Ice and Fire and Lord of the Rings. Unfortunately, it seems very possible to me the story could end with all the non-human races essentially extinct. The giants will almost certainly be gone. I like the show's idea of a dragon surviving, but flying off potentially to Valyria. But this would amount to extinction. What do you think? Do the children of the forest stand a good chance of surviving, assuming there are some on the Isle of Faces or even in the deep woods or caves further south? Best wishes, warmest regards, and to you too. So, the link across the Lord of the Rings is obviously that after the main action of the Lord of the Rings. Then what comes next over time is what's known as the Dominion of Man, and all of the kind of the magical beings just go away. The elves head off west. The dwarves lock their gates, keep on digging deeper and deeper. The orcs, largely destroyed during the War of the Ring, Aragorn and co. round up what's left. The dragons, Smaug was the last of the great dragons. The others are sort of off in the far extent to the north. So, one by one, you just go, okay, so all of these kind of magical creatures have disappeared. This is now the Dominion of Man. Is the same going to happen in this? Potentially. My general take is that it sort of has already happened. So the giants are now, and the children of forest, they've got mythical status in Westeros. The vast majority of people have never seen one or known anyone who has seen one. So yes, there are giants north of the wall. I agree, they're almost certainly going to die out by the end of this story. The children of the forest, I have a feeling some will probably survive, but they're going to keep to what they always have kept to. They're not here to be sort of advancing, to be gaining new ground or land. They just want to live their life. So some probably will survive, probably in places we don't know or understand. They're not going to come out and show us who they are or where they are. So, yeah, they will kind of disappear from memory. As for the others, I think that threat has to be dealt with. The magic that created them, brought them into being in whatever way, I think has to be undone in some way. And the dragons, the threat also has to be eliminated. I think I'm pretty sure at least 2 of the 3 dragons will die. Drogon, I don't know. I did quite like the idea that Drogon just kind of flies away and we don't know where it's gone. And so, yes, the threat has disappeared for humanity because Drogon is incredibly powerful and could do a huge amount of damage. But it's gone for the time being. And they just have to be slightly on edge and wary. So I do like that as a concept. Not in terms of the. I'm just trying to think of the Lord of the Rings kind of analogy. As I say, I think we were almost there, but this is almost as if we've got a slight difference. Is that all of these magical beings had disappeared, but now they're just making this kind of comeback. The dragons have reappeared, the others are reappearing. Whoa, they're giants and we never knew it, that kind of thing. So they're going to have like this final hurrah, and then they will recede and go away. Flame G, my question is, do you think the Children of the Forest had created the others as it was depicted in the main show? Perhaps that was one of the things George R. R. Martin had revealed to the showrunners. Yeah, so I've sort of covered this one off. Apologies, I probably should have bracketed this with one of the earlier questions. I sort of covered it in earlier things, but broadly speaking, I think that's the best working hypothesis that we have. Not exactly the same way. It seemed very low key, not very magical. I like this idea that whatever it was that brought the others into being was this preternatural event, this magical event that put all of the seasons out of balance, which makes it a very different thing to let's just push this bit of dragon glass into someone and then their eyes will change color. That just seemed very low key. There has to be some kind of huge magical thing. So the principle, but not how it actually works. Something else I was going to say on that one. Can't remember. Okay, let's go to a question from Stephanie Morin saying, "Greetings, Robert, and the goodest boy Dan. First-time writer, long-time listener." Well, fantastic. You're very welcome. I love your idea that the Weirwoods originated on the Isle of Faces. Do you think this is also the birthplace of the children? Also love to hear your thoughts on that origin. Do you think they will once again join with man to fight the others? Love and light to you and Dan. Well, thank you very much, and to you and yours. The origin of the children is one of those things that George R. Martin is. I think he's not going to tell us. I think that we're sort of supposed to imagine that they emerged just as the first main intelligent life on Westeros. Whether that's like over a long period of evolution, whether that was sort of a creation event kind of thing, I don't think he's ever going to tell us. All we know is that they were there before humans were there, and that they had spread out across the entire continent. Could they have started on the Isle of Faces? Maybe. The Isle of Faces seems to have been important before the pact, but it became very important afterwards. If we're to take the understanding that the children of the forest are, yes, they're magical beings, but they're also, they need to eat, they need to breathe, they need to do all the other kinds of things that living beings have to do. If they evolved, then I think the Isle of Faces is not the place where they would need to evolve on. It would be somewhere out on the wider world, because the Isle of Faces is a small island and it seems to be covered in trees. And so there's not much by way of food and a variety of different environments that they could sort of develop and thrive in. Added to which, just getting to the mainland is a big issue. We talked about this when we were talking about the Isle of Faces. The image we often have of the Isle of Faces is something like what we saw on House of the Dragon, where the Isle of Faces it's pretty close to the shore. It's you can very much see it from Harrenhal. It's just over there. That's not how it is in the books. This is a small island in the middle of the largest lake in Westeros. And when we say the largest lake, we're talking 100 miles end to end. You cannot see the island from any shore, probably. It is a very long way. And so if the children did start there, then going anywhere else, their entire life and culture would have started that this is all of the world. That as far as we can see, every other direction is just water, and it would have required some to be setting off on this massive journey over the water to what we think of as the mainland. Which isn't to say it didn't happen, but that completely changes our understanding of how they might develop. Reflective rambling heading off. Thank you so much. Great to see you. And let's go to a question from Lord Medici. The children of the forest spoke the old tongue, while humans in present-day Westeros speak the common tongue. But is the common tongue literally English? Martin does take the effort of other languages sounding foreign, like Dothraki and Valyrian, even codifying some of their linguistic rules. But if we as readers can access the main story, is it because the main characters in speaking the common tongue are speaking English? Or are they also speaking a foreign language, but being the in-world lingua franca, it's been translated for us? Excellent questions. And I think the answer is George R. Martin doesn't go that deep on it. J.R.R. Tolkien was a philologist. He invented languages. We know this. He cared about this kind of stuff. So, of course, it mattered to him what languages the different people were speaking in and how that related to us as readers, and the what we would call the writer's conceit there was that he was not just a creator of a world, but he had stumbled across some ancient manuscripts and the Red Book and things like that, and he was translating that for us into English. So that was his writing conceit, that what he would do was take sort of the more common tongue there, and then translate that into English, and then he would be writing other things in the other languages because we're just going to be using the main language here. So that was what was going on there. George R. R. Martin has not gone that deep. He has not said, I have discovered these manuscripts and I'm translating them for you. He is just writing this with ourselves transported into that world. The other languages he has created, he is very open in saying that he has not created those languages. He clearly understands language well enough to be able to create a kind of a feel to the words and the structures of different things in different languages. But in High Valyrian, for example, I think he only came up with 7 words and a feel for it. Dothraki, a few more words than that, but the actual languages themselves were created by a very talented linguist called David Peterson for the TV show. And George R. R. Martin did not go to him with an extensive set of rules and things like that. David Peterson was working from the books. George R. R. Martin loved what came out at the other side, but he has always been very open. He is not a linguist. So the common tongue that we are reading this in and everything is there is just because he is telling us this story for us. He's not trying to put us into this story and pretend in some way that he has discovered this and he is translating it for us. That's a Tolkien thing. That's not a George R. R. Martin thing. Bear Island. Hello, Robert. I hope you and Dan are well. If the children broke the arm of Dawn with the Hammer of the Waters, did that event magically sever weirwoods in Essos, magically corrupting them, or was their corruption unrelated? I think I've already covered that one, if that's okay, Bear Island, from some super chats and previous questions. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on the timeline we are given in regard to the First Men, the Long Night, the Wall, and the Andals, as it doesn't seem quite right to me. Thanks again to the mods and to you and for all you do. Well, thank you very much. In terms of the timeline, I don't know which bit doesn't quite work for you. As far as I'm concerned, the first bit and the last bit seem to work fine. It's only the bit sort of in the middle that is a bit uncertain. So, the idea that in the beginning, as it were, the children of the forest and the giants were living in Westeros, and then humanity came in and started invading, that bit works. For me, that seems to make absolute sense. Similarly, the more kind of recent side of things, and when I say recent, we're still talking thousands of years ago, the fact that the Andals had this kind of slow immigration invasion thing going on, that took over the southern part of Westeros, but not the northern part, that also kind of makes sense to me. The bit where the slight uncertainty comes, I think, is the Long Night, the creation of the Wall, the Night's Watch, things like that. Because I think the standard mode of thinking is something along the lines of when humanity were sort of starting to take over Westeros, the children of the forest had to create some great weapon to fight them with. This was the others. They did this, and this was so effective, it got out of control, and the others started taking over all of Westeros. But eventually, the children helped humanity defeat and push back the others. In response to that, in order to prevent this happening again, they built this wall and then created the Night Watch to be manning the wall. That seems to be the standard default timeline that most people go with. There are tweaks to that. Some people have tweaks to that, and there are some things that don't quite match that in the legends that we have. For example, we're told that the people who were in the War for the Dawn, the climactic battle, as it were, in the first long night, that was the Night's Watch, which seems to imply that the Night's Watch were created before the end of the long night, which seems to imply they were created before the wall, which does make you wonder whether or not the wall was there before. So there's a few of these kind of things that kind of feel a bit uncertain. Some people, I don't personally agree with this, but some people suggest that the wall was perhaps made by the others because it's very clearly ice. So I don't particularly agree with that, but if it was, then that also has to shift the timeline around a little bit. So I think that bit in the middle about the exact timing of what happened with the long night, the others, etc., that I think we've got a bit of wiggle room on, but the first bit and the last bit kind of work for me. And I think the pact that kind of happens somewhere in that period. Exactly where you think that happens is perhaps this happens before the others take over everywhere, or perhaps this happens after the whole thing is done and dusted and humanity has seen the power of the gods of the children of the forest. For me, I don't think that hugely changes our understanding of how the world operates. But yeah, the first bit, I think, is pretty set in stone. The latter bit, I think, is pretty set in stone. It's just around that period of the long night that we may have some differences. Let's go to agree with what we're saying. Let's build a structure that our enemies can cross, but we can't. Yeah, so this is the one of the main arguments for why it wasn't the others, is that the magic within the barrier of the wall is not actually the height of the wall. The barrier is the magic, which seems to prevent the others from passing through. So if they built it, then why on earth did they build it in a way that prevent them going through? But clearly humans can pass to and fro. Let's go to a question from Corvus Codex. This question is about a statement that Bran made in Book 1 regarding the loss of Benjen Stark. Bran announces that Benjen will be saved or helped by the Children of the Forest. Is this foreshadowing for Bran's eventual rescue, or is it a prophetic answer about where Benjamin ended up? I think it's... Well, we don't know, but it certainly makes sense to me that that is what happened. That the Children of the Forest in some way saved him. I did a video about what happened to Benjen Stark, but the short version is that he heads north with this small group of Night's Watchmen. They clearly are attacked by the others in some way, because two, at least, are killed and turned into whites. Those are the ones who come back to the wall, and then they're discovered and brought back into Castle Black, and one of them attacks Gerald Mormont. So they clearly get attacked. Benjen, though, doesn't seem to have been one of them. Given what we see with Cold Hands, who was saved by the Children of the Forest, I think it's probably fair to say that there's a good chance that or some version of that happened with Benjen, whether he was actually kind of brought back in the same way that Cold Hands was, or whether they just helped him out, I don't know. But as with all of these things, we, I think, leap to is this prophetic? Is this foreshadowing? And sometimes miss the context of what was going on there. And that was that in book one, it's a no magic fantasy setting. The prologue, yes, ice zombies. The last few pages of the last chapter, dragons appear. Most of the rest of the book, with the exception of the Bran visions while he's in a coma thing, most of the rest of the book, there's no real magic going on. And all of the characters that we're told to respect as being clever and knowledgeable, Tyrion, Maester Luwin, they just scoff at the idea of all of this magic. Bran says, I think the children of the forest would have saved him, which shows us that he is going against the grain. Despite everything he's being taught by the world around him, he is the one who's there going down this magical path, believing in magic. So that is what is happening in the context of that particular moment. Yes, there may well be foreshadowing about what happened with Benjen, but I don't think that's the primary aim of what was going on with him. Great Khan, thank you very much. Regarding the Isle of Faces, I wonder whether a shy could be an accidental or unintentional dark version of the Isle of Faces. Was a shy once weirwood, but even the timber, as it perhaps was at the time, was poisoned? Yes, that's my working theory. And when I say my working theory, I've already mentioned the great work that Amanda Disputed Lands has done on this. So I'm just building on that. If you say that the Shade of the Evening are some kind of corrupted weirwood tree, which the color imagery, the magical tree sap stuff all perhaps suggests, then you say, okay, so what about the wood from Shade of the Evening trees? Well, we know what happens to weirwood when it dies, when it's chopped down, is it becomes as hard as stone and it becomes white. We see this in a number of different places, in doorways and tables, things like that. What would Shade of the Evening do if it is this kind of dark, corrupted version? Well, probably it would be stone-like but black. And when you read the description of the copse, the small wood of Shade of the Evening trees outside the House of the Undying, then it seems to be very dark, almost as if it's kind of drinking in light. That echoes what's going on in a shy that also we're told is very dark and drinks in light, and all of the buildings are made out of this kind of black, oily stone. So, yes, my working theory is that there were way more of these weirwoods, and they were chopped down and made into buildings, which was the basis of a shy. And then over time, these turned into stone, and it becomes this kind of oily black stone that kind of drinks in light. Great Khan again, thank you very much. Saying, was this? Oh, actually, this is the following on. Even the timber, as it was perhaps was at the time, was poisoned into its black Shade of the Evening mirror, which also infected the populace in a way, echoing the Green Men, strange masked isolationists, unusually high concentration of magic users, allegedly no children, undead. Yeah, so the imagery there is, as you say, it's exactly right. It's quite isolationist. It feels a shy feels like it's an island, even though it actually isn't. And maybe George R. R. Martin loves his kind of word play puns, if that's the right way of saying it. So the classic example is when you get Arya, who's in Bravos under the name Cat of the Canals, and Sansa, who's in the Eyrie under the name of Elaine. You put them together, you get Cat, Elaine, Catelyn. They're the daughters of Catelyn. That is, I'm pretty sure, intentional on his part. He loves that kind of little bit of wordplay. There are other examples we could go to. Here, I do wonder if we've got, I don't know whether this is what you were hinting at, but if so, I agree. If we've got this idea that the shade of the evening trees are a kind of a dark, corrupted version of the weirwoods, if we think that a shy is made out of that, it then becomes the greatest concentration of dead shade of the evening trees, a kind of a dark, polluted version of the Isle of Faces. Who is always around the weirwood trees? Children of the forest. What are there none of in a shy? Children. It's the kind of weird wordplay that he does like. I'm not saying that's evidence for it, but it does kind of work. Plus Ballerina, hi there. Saying, is the ice language of the others a part of the true tongue? Can humans ever learn to speak either of them? If yes, why didn't the faceless men adopt that too? It's not faceless men. I think FM first men adopt that too. So the ice language of the others, we're only told it sounds, and we had somebody earlier gave us a description of it. It's like cracked ice. It doesn't sound human. The language of the children of the forest also doesn't sound human. It's like natural sounds. So why did the first men not adopt it? Because it doesn't come naturally to the human voice box. We don't naturally make those sounds. So the old tongue is something that the giants use and some of the wildlings use. But this is distinct from what those other two languages we've got. So why not speak it? Because it just doesn't work for humans. And I think it's as simple as that. As I said, George R. R. Martin doesn't go into as much detail as someone like Tolkien on the languages. It's more of a kind of like hand wave situation a lot of the time. But in this instance, it's very clear these are not human sounds. Let's go to a question from Per Marcus Rissman saying, Seven's blessings, Robert, from a chilly north, dreaming of spring. In the books, at first glance, the children of the forest seem to be a Westeros exclusive race. As with much of the lore, however, there are hints that this might not be the case. Do you believe that the children of the forest may have populated Essos as well, perhaps under another name? Or are the references to another race perhaps partly, or to another race perhaps partly or entirely? And do you think these children, or what they ever were, where they might have been involved in the long night fighting against the others, as the legends say they did in Westeros? So I think I've answered a lot of this one already, so I hope you'll forgive me if I don't go over the same ground. In terms of did they help against the others in Essos, we don't get... Well, in Essos, just a quick geography lesson, we've already talked about the Bone Mountains. Goes north-south through Essos, right through the middle, where you get Yeti on one side and what is now the Dothraki Sea on the other side. If you're on the western side of that, over into Valyria, the Free Cities, what is now the Dothraki Sea, stuff like that, they definitely have a remembrance legends of the long night where it was freezing cold, the river Royne froze over, etc. All of that is there. They definitely have some legends that connected to it, like Azor Ahai, but that in terms of the legends of beings, magical beings invading, those come from east of the Bone Mountains, from the legends and history of Yi. And we're not told this, but it kind of feels right. The five forts, sort of to the north and east of Yi, they feel very much, they're ancient defensive structures. They feel very much like the wall. So if what we're looking at in terms of the first long night was the others coming from what we would consider to be the North Pole, it's entirely possible that there was more than one way down through Westeros, or down and through the sort of the eastern part of Essos. So, and therefore, the legends we have could be of two different theatres of war in the Long Night. How does this relate to the Children of the Forest? The rumours or legends of the Woods Walkers that we have are from west of the Bone Mountains. So that part that seems to have been affected by the Long Night, but we don't have the sort of direct rumours of alien bad guys attacking it, rather than east of the Bone Mountains where we have both. Is that conclusive? No, not at all, because we don't have huge amounts of information about Essos. The further east you go, George R. Martin is very open about this. The in-world information is very much from the equivalent of a Eurocentric perspective, with the kind of maps that were there. Well, here's Europe, and we've drawn it very clearly, but then it starts fading out, and then it's here be dragons. We just do not know what's over there. That's the feel that he was going for. In Essos, the further east you go, the less we know about it. The fewer people from Westeros who have ever been there. People from Westeros, lots of people from Westeros have been to Bravos. We know huge amounts about that. Some of them have been as far as like Norvos or someone, into the Dothraki Sea. A few have been maybe to Karth. One or two have been to Ashai. Beyond that, no, we simply do not know. And that's the kind of feel that we've got. And that means that when you're heading the further that way you go, the more kind of mysterious and potentially exaggerated the stories are. The when you go further east than Ashai, north and east of Ashai, none of the stories are of, oh well, there's a great civilized nation over there that just do nice trade or anything like that. It's then, here's the city of the winged men. Here's where the dead walk. Here's where dragons are, and it's like everything's very kind of filled with superlatives and things of wonder, not just a boring humans living in a town here and a settlement there. So what I'm trying to say through all of that is that were the Children of the Forest involved? Possibly. We, but it is simply not recorded. There's no evidence that they were in particular in Essos, but the lack of evidence here, I think, it doesn't really tell us huge amounts. Lady Vaughan-Strauss saying, hello, Robert and Dan. Have the Children of the Forest induced Bloodraven unwittingly into his position? Are they responsible for the cultivation of Bran as his replacement? I've sort of covered this one a little bit earlier, but what I will add to that is to say that I think Bloodraven went willingly. Are they responsible for the cultivation of Bran as his replacement? I don't think they see him as a replacement. I think they see him as a greenseer, and they're just very short on greenseers. So are they behind it all? Well, ultimately, yes. And the Weirwood network as a whole, definitely. It's not Bloodraven coming in here and sort of taking over and I'm now directing everything. Um, it, it's a lot more kind of subtle and um, more working together. I think Bloodraven, my reading of Bloodraven is that he understood, he knew about the long nights, he knew about the threat from the others, he knew about the prophecies about the prince that was promised. While he was in the Seven Kingdoms, he was actively trying to bring about what he thought was necessary in order to save humanity, the prince that was promised from the right line. Then, as he was getting old, he went north of the wall and hooked himself up to the Weirwood network, and he was working in that way behind the scenes, influencing things. Pal Kosnak saying it would be funny if they told Bloodraven he'd only be there for like an hour, then they locked him in with the roots. Classic psych maneuver, crude but effective. Yeah, I mean it's possible. We just do not know. Madeline Tyrell Dane. Hi, Robert. Hope you and Dan are very well. Love this topic. If the first men parallel Celtic cultures, do you think the children of the forest could be inspired by the Fae that coexisted with humans in folklore? And could the others represent a more hostile version of the Celtic Fae? George R. Martin has, when it comes to the others, specifically name-checked the She as kind of like fairies, and which you will have come across, even if you're not like a sort of a folklore expert, you will have come across this in kind of classic fantasy literature. This idea of uh, the the fairies, the elves, the she, the other, um, who exist sort of in another realm, but they're coexisting with humans. They're different. They're not to be trusted. They've got different ideas, cultures, and things like that. They're magical and they're powerful, and they should be a little bit feared, but they are also beautiful. He has um, specifically said that that's a kind of inspiration for the feel for the others, which means that then that's not the children of the forest. I don't think that and if you're a folklore expert, I'm sure you will be able to come up with what this kind of thing is. But for me, they're closer to the kind of the feel of the more the kind of like the dryads or the beings that live within nature, not like in parallel to humanity in some way over there, perhaps existing on a different plane. They're very much rooted, pun intended, into this plane of existence. But they're there. You can't always see them. Um, uh, so that's the kind of feel. They, in a kind of a weird way, they do kind of remind me of the Ents, in as much as the Ents aren't entirely on anyone's side because no one's entirely on their side. That's the kind of feel we have, trying to look after the trees, trying to look after nature. So yeah, that's where I think we're going with this. George R. Martin takes inspiration rather than cutting and pasting things, though. So he will take thoughts and feels from different places without saying that's exactly like that. A big tweet saying, "Hello, I'm new to your stream, but I love your videos." Well, thank you. It's fantastic to see you, and that's very kind of you. I was wondering if you enjoyed all 8 seasons of the main show. Oh well, I mean, this is obviously a while ago now. Uh, I'm trying to remember the form of words I've used at the, at the time. Yes, I enjoyed all of them in as much as um, I think the first few seasons were peak TV. The reason why everyone is upset, including me, by how it ended, is because the start of the show was so good. If it had started off rubbish and ended rubbish, then we wouldn't be talking now about how this was such they didn't land the ending or anything like that. It would be saying, well, it just carried on as it was. The reason why everyone's disappointed by the end is because the start is so good. When I say enjoyed the last few seasons, having sort of rewatched them, I can enjoy, and I think that the discourse at the time was very much that it's either good or it's bad. Um, I think that we hopefully have now reached a point where we can actually be a little bit more nuanced about this and say, even up to the end of season 8, the acting was great. It looked fantastic. The set design on so many things was brilliant. There were some scenes which were brilliant. The music stayed absolutely top notch. In fact, for me, I think the music probably peaked in season 6 or something like that. The um, the visuals, the way that there are some scenes which worked perfectly for TV, and they structured them really well for TV in a way that would not be possible in the book. So, for example, the destruction of the Great Sept. That, if you remember back to it, you've got the growing music that switched between 4 or 5 different POVs. We see Cersei there acting all serene, getting her glass of wine. We see Tommen not being allowed to leave. We see Marjorie slowly realizing that something's very wrong. We see Lancel figuring out something and trying desperately to stop it. It moves between all these different places, and that working together created what I think was a fantastic bit of TV. So that, as an example, is what TV brought to this that is not possible. That doesn't mean that whatever George R. R. Martin writes, I'm sure will be epic and wonderful in its own right, but it won't be in the same way. So there are many things that I could say about season 8 and earlier seasons. Um, Many things that I think just don't quite work. But I think actually I've got a question. I'm going to link this in actually with a question from Relax Like a Cat, who said proximity to the original text is sometimes considered a measure of whether a George R. R. Martin adaptation is good, but there have been departures that have been successful, such as Paddy Considine's depiction of Viserys. Do you think the need to be close to George R. R. Martin's vision is what ruined the end of the Game of Thrones TV show for some viewers? Um, in terms of what some viewers saw as a sudden change in Dany, for example. So um, the more I think of the ending, I think 2 things stand out for me. The first is the speed running of the ending. It just charged through whole bits of plot that seemed to be sort of missed or tried to cram into just a couple of scenes. You don't have the travel bits that we had so much that was such a great part of the first few seasons. You often get the decision, I'm going to do this thing, and then cut to the next scene and they're somewhere else. It just felt like they were just trying to get through plot rather than develop things and build things up along that. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is what George R. R. Martin would call toxic butterflies. Decisions made early on mean that what happens at the end can't be the same as what happens in the books. Um, the moment you say, and these are quite big decisions, the moment that you decide, well, then I'm not going to be including the whole young Griff Fagon storyline, that changes so much about what happens, because our current best hypothesis is that he is going to take King's Landing, and he is going to be ruling in King's Landing when Dany arrives, and that is going to be a very different story to her arriving and Cersei's ruling, because what's his reaction going to be? Well, his thought was that he was wanting to marry her, which is very different to what Cersei was expecting. So that changes the entire dynamic, and that will then impact, because this is butterflies, that then impacts onto how does that change her relationship to John, because suddenly John is not the most eligible person in the Seven Kingdoms for her. That is Fagon. So the whole thing multiplies out. Uh, yes, as a general thing, I think adherence to the text is really good and really important. Um, yes, also there are some things which can be added in, which can be brilliant, and I agree with you 100%. Paddy Considine, uh, as Viserys, George R. Martin himself said his Viserys was better than mine. He added this extra layer. Um, how that performance didn't get all manner of awards, I do not know, but I thought it was fantastic. So you can add things in as long as you are true to the feel of what is there and you're not sort of going beyond it. But season 8 of Game of Thrones for me, the speed running and the toxic butterflies. Um, I think I had another couple of questions. Adam Dangersmith saying, "What if Rhaenys knew about the prophecy and Dawn um, took it out of her, and in the letter to they tortured it out of her, and in the letter to Aegon, Dawn was like, 'We know about the prophecy and we believe it. We will do a truce.'" Okay, so this is Aegon's invasion. Dawn did not fall, and for a very long time, um, they uh, the dragons, the Targaryens and the dragons would just be like firebombing the whole place. The Dornish would just sort of hide underground somewhere, and then when the dragons had gone away, they come back up again. Um, Rhaenys was sort of at the head of this for a lot of it, but then her dragon got shot down over the Hellholt. The end of the conflict with Dawn came when there was a new Prince Nymor came to rule in Dawn, change of policy very clearly, and he wrote a letter, gave it to his daughter to go up to King's Landing, hand it to Aegon. We don't know exactly what that letter said. What we do know is that while reading it, Aegon gripped the handle of the throne so tightly that it drew blood. He flew over to Dragonstone straight away, came back the next day and said, "We'll have peace." Now, I did a video, I think it's still up, of what I think was going on there. Because I think there are a few different options, but one clearly stands out and matches the facts, not just in terms of what happened then, but what happened afterwards. Might the letter be, "We know about this prophecy and we believe it"? It could be. Doesn't explain why he um, gripped the Iron Throne so tight. Doesn't explain, unless it was like we admit we tortured your sister. Doesn't explain why he went to Dragonstone. And if the prophecy is right, the prophecy is that, at least as far as we've been told through House of the Dragon, this is still not from the big man himself, is that the Targaryens must be ruling a united Seven Kingdoms. If Dawn believed that, then they would want to be a part of the United Seven Kingdoms, not just agree a truce. So I like the thinking. It doesn't quite stack up with the facts that we have. But yeah, I like the thinking, and it is deliberately kept a bit of a mystery by him. Ariel Winchester saying, "Got here late. Apologies if this has been asked. Do not worry. How do you see things ending for the Children of the Forest? Will there be any left? Will we see some on the Isle of Faces? Will they stay in the north?" Yes, so some of this has been asked already, so not a problem. I will answer this quickly for you. How do you see things ending for the Children of the Forest? I think they are, in their way, trying to help and orchestrate the opposition to the others. The others will be pushing down from the north. I think they will destroy everything north of the wall, including Bloodraven's Cave. I think those children are goners. However, I suspect there are other children out there. yes, perhaps on the Isle of Faces, but also Leaf says that she spent some time wandering around the Seven Kingdoms. There's probably some hidden in the Seven Kingdoms that we simply do not know about. Will there be any left? Probably, but they don't want to be known. So we will never know for sure. They will hide in their hollow hills. They will hide in their deep forests. They will hide in their crannogs, and humanity won't know. Great Khan, if you don't mind me asking, how did you first come to A Song of Ice and Fire, and what prompted you to turn your obsession into a YouTube channel? I'm glad you did, by the way. Well, thank you. I'm glad you're glad. Yeah, I've not told this for a while. So many years ago, don't know when. I was at a bookstore, and I was with a friend, and you have friends who you trust their taste in books. And he just pulled this book out for me, and he said, "There's here's a book I think you'll like," and it was book one, A Game of Thrones. And I sort of read the blurb, and I thought, yeah, that sounds good. But it wasn't finished. Obviously, the series wasn't finished. I had recently been stung by um, Robert Jordan and the Wheel of Time, which, if you were there, you'll remember he tragically died before finishing it. Obviously, Brandon Sanderson did finish it off for him a bit later, but I can remember thinking, I'll buy the book, but I'm not going to start reading it until it's all there. So I got the book and I put it on the bookshelf, and that's where it lived for a little while. And then I watched the TV show, and I watched season one, and I loved it so much. I got the book out and I read the book, and then I got the other books and I read those books, and then that was all before I watched season two, and then I watched season two to the end. So that's my kind of journey, which has left me in this weird position where I don't know what you're like when you're reading books or watching TV shows. Is that I find if you watch a TV show then read the book, then the characters in the book look and sound like the TV show. Whereas if you read the book and then watch the TV show, you find yourself looking at the characters in the TV show and go, "Oh, that's not quite right," because they're like that in my mind. Um, when it comes to the TV show for Game of Thrones, it's kind of half and half. And the books is that the characters who I first met on the TV show, that's what they are like in my mind. The characters who I first met in the books, that's what they're like in my mind. Yeah, that was where it was, and it was probably somewhere between season 6 and 7 that I decided I would just give it a go, make a YouTube channel. I um, just as sort of random advice for anyone who's thinking about this kind of thing, I just did it. I just tried it. I had a spare day, which was a wonderful thing if you ever have a spare day. And I literally Googled, how do you make a YouTube video? Found a couple of bits of software. I downloaded some free software, made a video. That video is on my main channel. I kept it up. It was called something like The Real Tyrion Lannister. It's only about 5 minutes long. I look back on it and I cringe now. I'm speaking so slowly in a really deadpan voice. I'm just using still images from the show that kind of stay on there for a very long time. Nothing's moving. I look back and I go, I have improved so much since then. But that is the point. I have kept it up there because I want to encourage people. If you're trying something, your first video will be rubbish. Do not worry about it. That's the thing you're going to get the most learning from in all your journey. So yeah, that's where we're at. And I just sort of carried on, and eventually it kind of took over. Um, I think I had another question. Don't think I missed one. Maybe I have. No, I think that's me caught up in the chat, and then probably got 2 or 3 more questions from my patrons. Otis480 saying, hello, Robert. Thanks for the live streams and videos. You're very welcome. In the last live stream, there's a short period of speculation about Bran living on the Quiet Island and reigning in the Seven Kingdoms. I think the Isle of Faces rather than the Quiet Isle. But yes, and walking into an animal that lives in the capital. Yeah, I remember that. It was quite a fun little discussion. I tinfoiled this a bit further. Bran would likely choose a wolf as an animal to walk into. However, a dog would be more socially acceptable. Therefore, a dog would become a member of the small council. However, the maesters would not like this open display of magic, and therefore, Dran, the dog's I like what you did there. Public appearances would be extremely rare. What are your thoughts on this? On a more serious note, several years ago, I heard a theory that Euron and Dario are the same person, but I haven't heard anything about this theory for some years now. Do you know what happened to that theory? Well, in terms of Dran the dog, I love it. I think if Bran were to be walking into something, he wouldn't walk in to be a member of the small council. I know this was tongue in cheek on your part, but I take these things seriously. Then I think he would walk into a person, skin change into a person, rather than an animal, which is darker and more horrific. But maybe that's where we end up with this. As for the is Euron Dario? What happened to that theory? Yeah, I vaguely remember the theory. It was around a while ago. I always filed that under one of those theories of which there are many. Is this character secretly that character? There are many, and the vast majority are almost certainly not right. And most of the reason why most of them are not right is that actually this would make this world so much smaller. It each individual thing makes it sound more intriguing. Oh, there's a mystery going on here. We've had a lot of this character is secretly that character kind of thing already happening here. If this is like every other character is secretly some other character, that actually just becomes a little bit trite, in my view. I think George R. R. Martin is a better writer than that. So what happened to that theory? I've not heard it for a very long time. The main argument against it was simply timing, and also why. The timing is, we know what's going on with Euron right now, and we know what's going on with Dario right now. They're clearly on other sides of the planet, so it's not the idea that they're secretly the same person just doesn't kind of work out. But then if they were somehow magically like that, Dario was there as Dany's lover. Euron is trying to get Dany and her dragons. Why on earth would he bother going to this whole expense of sending the Iron Fleet and Dragonbinder and Victarion all the way over to the other side of the world if he's already there? Yeah, the reason why is that it just didn't fit the facts, I'm afraid. Now is a good time to drop some more questions into the chat. I've got one more, Martin S. I've got your question here, but if you want to ask me any more things, now is a good time to drop into that. For My People said, in case you all didn't know, Robert has a murder hoodie like Damon's. Yeah, this is a reference to the early days of the channel where I thought it looked pretty cool. I've still got it somewhere. Can't remember whether I had it as my avatar or just like a picture of me in like a cowl. It looks good, I thought. I do like it. But yeah, that disappeared after a year or two. Martin S. saying, hello, Robert. This is not about George R. Martin's world, but about speculative fiction in general. For many years, I was bothered by illogical underdog wins fights, strong as they need to be, and similar tropes in speculative fiction. I think I know why they've happened, or always known why they happen, but have formulated it more clearly as three things: severe imbalance in combat capability, plausibility or logic, that events unfold in a way that reasonably should happen. And 3, tension. The outcome is uncertain. You go into more detail on this, which I hope you'll forgive me for not reading all of it out. But yes, what you say makes sense. What I will do in response, I think, is to talk about this in relation to George R. R. Martin, because he uses this a lot, in as much, and I think in a good way, in as much to try and we always think about, or we used to talk about him as kind of like going against expectations, undermining expectations, things like that. He loves this idea that the big, strong, heavily armored fighter is actually defeatable by the nimble, lightly armored, fast moving fighter. And we see this a lot of times, over and over again. The classic example, you probably already think of it, is the Mountain and Oberyn Martell. Now, obviously, at the end, doesn't end up well for Oberyn, but if he'd not been on his revenge mission, he would have killed the Mountain, stayed well clear, and won that easily. We also see it in things like Bronn in the Eyrie against whatever his name was, fully armored Knight of the Vale. Bronn, hardly armored at all, skipping around to the extent that the Knights of the Vale were shouting out at him that he just wasn't playing fair, because he was dodging behind statues and columns and things like that, and letting this knight in his full plate armor just get more and more tired. And they wanted just 2 people in armor just bashing away at each other. George R. R. Martin likes showing that, yes, the obvious type of power is not always the best type of power, and also showing characterization through that established trope of a type of combat. He is showing us not only that Bronn is a good fighter, but also that he's quick thinking. He's also showing us about the mindset of the Knights of the Vale. They're not there just to win. They want a good battle. They want everybody to be doing what they ought to be doing, and that's how he's showing us that through this trope of the 2 different fighting styles. With the Mountain versus Doran, having established this idea, that's when he subverts it at the very end. Is he shows that even that, the nimble fighter, can be defeated by overconfidence and focusing in too much on hatred and emotions and things like that. So George R. R. Martin is very aware of this too, and he uses it, I think, to good effect. Okay, questions in the chat. Kai's Ballerina, do you think the old god's magic will fade with the death of the children of the forest, like fire magic lessened when the dragons died? Or is there enough of their magic DNA interwoven into humanity to keep it going forever? So it's an interesting question. So I think it depends on what you count as the children of the old god's magic. So the old god magic is the weirwood trees, and the weirwood trees will be there as long as the weirwood trees are there. That is not fading. The skin changing and green dreams, that exists in humans in small measure, probably through some intermarriage with the children of the forest way, way, way back in time. Only 1 in 1,000 is a skin changer. Only one skin changer in 1,000 is a green seer. That may well be the case north of the wall. South of the wall, even fewer. So the more over time, then yes, that is going to be less and less the case. The hints are that there perhaps way back in time were more skin changes in the north, but now not so many. That's the north. South of the wall. North of the wall, that's still staying quite high. In terms of the third type of magic, the intentional sacrificial magic, um, that is still accessible, but it will die out as the children of the forest have died. In fact, it pretty much has. I think now they do not have the capability to do that kind of big magic, the hammer of the waters kind of magic. Indeed, the majority understanding within the fandom that the two hammer of the waters, the first one was very successful, the second one less successful, goes to show that the power level they've got there is coming down. Great Khan saying there's that's a hell of a unique perspective to see some characters as the actors and some as their book persona. Will the Cal return for a cameo? Will Dan? Well, yeah, I mean the actors and I think this is true for everyone. In terms of if you're watching a TV show and you've read the book, then you're judging the characters in the TV show against what they look like in your head. I don't think I'm alone in that. What I think was slightly different for me was the fact that because I watched some TV show, then read the books, then watched some more TV show, it's a mishmash. Will the Cal make a return? It did once 2 or 3 years ago, I think, for a Christmas special, as a um, as a reward when we hit I always do a charity Christmas live stream when we hit a certain milestone or something. I think I put it on just for old time's sake, but it was quite warm, so I took it back off again. As for Dan the dog, yeah, so he will, and if he's ever here during live streams, I will show you. The problem is that, well, two things. First of all, he gets a bit tired. I do these. My time, I start at about 10 p.m. And he's normally taken himself off to bed by then. If he hasn't, he doesn't. Greyhounds are quite sensitive souls. He doesn't actually like it when I do. If I'm sat here at this desk recording something, for example, and I get everything set up, and then I'm going to talk to my computer. He can sense I'm about to do it, and he just goes away. He doesn't like it when I'm clearly talking at my computer in a loud voice. Yeah, he kind of boycotts these live streams. So sorry about that. I will try and make sure. I've tried to my Instagram. I've done a couple of extra bits on there recently. Put a few pictures up there. People seem to like them. I will put up one of these days soon. I will put up some Dan the dog pictures for you because I know people want to see them. Martin S. Don't take strong too literally. I mean, whoever has the overall best chance of winning in an honest mental simulation of the fight. For instance, in Star Wars, Yoda is stronger than Chewbacca in who would win 1v1, even though Chewbacca clearly has more brute physical strength. Yeah, actually, I understand entirely what you mean. Another kind of because this is a Song of Ice and Fire stream, and because George R. Martin does use this a lot, then one other way he's played with this is the fight at the Tower of Joy, which is a 7 versus 3, and he actually he creates the Kingsguard as being this kind of white, wispy, kind of almost wraith-like characters. And that is something that he's taken that idea and used it in other settings like that, when you've got this kind of like, it's obvious who should be winning this, which is the stronger character in this. George R. Martin does like subverting expectations. But yeah, and if you were asking as well in sort of the wider fantasy world, fantasy, sci-fi even more so, does rely on tropes. Is my sort of broader take on this, and that's not a bad thing. It can be a bad thing, obviously, if you're only relying on tropes. But in sci-fi, for example, the story would be slowed down if every time you're trying to explain a thing, you have to go into all of the detail about exactly how the science behind it works. If somebody says, take us to hyperspace, you know exactly what they mean. You don't need to know the details of it. You understand you're pressing a button, you're going very fast. That's what it is. And so you rely on the trope to cut through all of the background noise. Fantasy, you can have your wizards, you can have your Assassin's Guild, and you kind of instinctively understand what's going on there. You can get the details later. It's tropes within the world of fantasy and science fiction can be quite useful. Caius Ballerina. Bran is told every bird has a warg in them. Do dead children's consciousnesses hop from bird to bird as each one die? Are they split between animals and the Weirwood network? Oh, this is an interesting one. So yes, Bran, when he starts his training with Bloodraven, the first thing is that let's do the skin changing thing. And so Bloodraven says, okay, let's go into the birds. And he goes into a bird and so flies around. He figures it out quite quickly. But while he's there, he realizes that in the corner of these birds, there's, in the same way as when he goes into Hodor, there's a little bit of Hodor's consciousness there. Then there's a little bit of consciousness of an old skin changer, child of the forest, whatever. Now, this is one of those things that it's not fully explained. I have to say, I don't know whether this was something George R. Martin fully thought through. And I think you're asking the exact right questions here, because I think the implication that he was going for here was that all of these, when Bran wanders around via Hodor, he sees all of these children of the forest kind of hooked up the Weirwood network. Some of them are basically just shriveled down. They're now just bones. And I think the implication he was going for was, and they have, like we read with skin changes as a whole, is that they're bonded animal. When they physically die, they sort of go into their bonded animal. Harol went into his eagle. Varamir Sixskins went looking for his wolves, that kind of thing. This is what happened there. But that doesn't 100% map up to this idea that these children of the forest have been there centuries. Are we to believe that these birds have been alive for centuries? Are we to believe that the consciousness sort of moves on from one bird to another? What's going on there? He's not explained that. Maybe there's some extra layer that he's not told us yet that we need to understand, or maybe this was just a little kind of a slip in trying to prove one thing, trying to show one thing, but hadn't quite worked through the logic. MRT, George R. Martin wrote an alien race that believes my enemy has an enemy and uses that to win wars. Could Children of the Forest do this? 10,000 year plan ends with the hive mind on the throne. Well, possibly. The idea of them ending up on the throne, obviously, we kind of tune into this idea because we're told that this is one of the three WTF things that the showrunners got from George R. Martin was Bran ends up on the throne, which, from the Children of the Forest perspective, you could say that means that they won. Certainly, the way they presented it in the TV show is that he is the Three-Eyed Raven now. He is the representation of the Weirwood network or whatever, and he's running the Seven Kingdoms. My view on that, though, is that I don't think the Children of the Forest care about ruling the Seven Kingdoms. They don't want to. There's been no indication that they are power grabbing, that they want the trappings of power in any way. They want to live their happy lives, singing their songs and living with nature. They don't want to be there in King's Landing and dealing with internal politics of humans. So they might be very happy to have one of their own, as it were. Bran's not quite one of their own, but we know what we mean there. Just making sure that humanity doesn't go off and do anything stupid. They might be okay with that. But to them, the Iron Throne is just blink of the eye. they've been around for thousands of years. The Iron Throne has only been around for 300 years. This is just a passing thing. There have been empires before in Westeros that have lasted longer than that. Not covering the entirety of Westeros, but um, uh, the Iron Throne is not what they were wanting from the beginning. It might be a thing that they opportunistically go for later, but not what they're wanting. Great Khan, would you ever tackle Dune as a subject matter? Yeah, I did an introduction to Dune a while ago. Dune is on my list of um, things. This year, I'm not expanding out from my 2.5 things I cover. 2.5 being obviously A Song of Ice and Fire, Lord of the Rings, and Witcher, which I cover in fits and spurts every now and then. I'll do 2 or 3 videos on it and then come back to it 6 months later. Dune is on that longer list of things. I've been encouraged a lot recently to get into Cosmere, the Brandon Sanderson stuff. So I have dipped my toe into that before. I will try again, see whether that's something I get interested in. There are various other things I've been asked about. I've been asked about Warhammer, Wheel of Time. There's a very long list of things potentially, but certainly not for the next 6 months or so. For my peoples, wouldn't most of the children's magic be the intentional type? Perhaps not warging, but we believe Jojen was sacrificed to awaken Bran, and all of it possibly sustained by the trees drinking blood. Um, well, yeah. I mean, I think we can sort of go around in sort of intellectual circles on this. Skin changing, green dreams seem unintentional, as in that's just stuff that you can do. Green dreams seem to just happen to you. You can't control them. Skin changing is a thing that maybe you've got that ability. Arya seems to do it literally in her sleep. So those things, they're very much part of the sort of the unintentional stuff. The weirwoods. I think maybe what you're asking is that the question is what started the weirwoods having this kind of magical element to them, which is allowing you to sort of see through them, for them to be experiencing things all moments in time at the same moment. The implication, I think, though we haven't been told this, is that the weirwoods they're just like that. They are just incredibly long-lived trees that are a bit magical and connect up with each other. The intentional bit that you're very right to point out, I think, is that if they are trying to get somebody to be able to access that, then they need to do certain things, like the weirwood paste. So, which does seem to include intentionality and sacrifice, from what we can see. See my Jojen paste video if you're interested and have a strong stomach. So yes, allowing people to access that does require some kind of intentionality, but there is no doubt that I think there's no doubt that the trees were already like that, and then when you access it, yes, it needs some kind of intentionality to it, but the way that Bran is taught, and this is all just going off of a few pages, so we don't know that we will probably learn more in time. But the way Bran is taught is that it's like skin changing. He's now basically been given the upgrade, so he can skin change not just into animals, humans. He can now skin change into trees. That is the way it is sort of described to him, which seems to imply that we then have to put that on the same kind of level. The intentionality comes into the opening up his mind to it. Right, let's have a quick flick through any more comments. Did so CBH asking, did Robert Baratheon, I assume, know that she was pregnant with Rhaegar's baby? Lyanna, nope. That's I think if he had, then he would have been a lot more suspicious of Ned returning from the Tower of Joy with a small child. Pixtos saying, we know George doesn't really have a set magic system. He leaves it up to us. But which religion would you say is the most real? The old gods seem real through the trees. Relore seems real. So um, real as in this is definitely a thing. Is there? Um, Relore magic definitely seems real. But then also what Maggie the Frog does definitely seems real. And what's going on with the House of the Undying definitely seems real. There's a lot of real magic here, so I don't think there's a matter of the most real. I think there's definitely an argument to be made about which religion seems best able to tap into real magic, but I don't think that we can say some bits of magic are real and some aren't. Even Melisandre, who undeniably can do real magic, she does things to make her magic look cooler. Let's put it that way. Okay, and I think with that, I'm going to start drawing this one to a close. Oh, this has been really interesting set of questions, actually. Thank you. We covered a lot more ground than I thought we were going to. Stuff to look forward to, more videos coming out if on the main channel if you're watching A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, and if you're not, I highly recommend it. It's been excellent so far. And you're watching this live, don't forget episode 4 is out a couple of days early because of the Super Bowl. And what else to say? Keep an eye out on this channel, on the live channel. I've got a few ideas of things doing. The shorts will be returning, and a few other random things. I'm just going to see what people like, what seems to work. So we will try that out, and then have a look for my main videos in other places: Facebook, Spotify, wherever. I'm trying to upload my back catalogue all over the place. So wherever you find it easiest, that is where to go. But if you're watching this back a little bit later on this channel, on IDG Live, then it's appearing somewhere here is going to be a link to more live streams. Appearing somewhere around here is going to be a link to my Patreon page, which is the best way to support this channel if you wish to do so. Thank you, patrons, once more. Thank you, moderators. You're amazing. If you're watching this live, give them a bit of love on the way out. But I will be back same time next week. Take care. Bye.